Okay, it's 6 o'clock on Tuesday, nope, I lied, Monday, October 28th.
It's my fault, I'm sorry.
I saw that.
2024.
Saw that.
I'm calling to order the select board meeting. We are meeting in the lower level of the Rutland Public Library on Main Street. We are on Zoom, as well as live streamed for local access cable. We're also being recorded for future re-airing on local access, YouTube, and other social media venues. Can we please rise for the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are a 4-member board, at least for the start of tonight's meeting. Harry, Jen, Tom, and myself. Paul is not here yet. I'm not sure if he will be able to join or not, and I don't see him on Zoom yet either. So just for announcement purposes. Moving into minutes, treasury warrants, and payroll. I would entertain a motion to approve treasury warrant 25-9 and 25-PW9.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Is there any questions, comments, concerns?
Austin, anything?
Nothing to know.
Roll call. Harry?
Second, aye.
Ledger, aye.
Galvin, aye.
Waitman, aye. We have some meeting minutes. We'll keep them separate since we have a executive session as well as a regular meeting minutes for our regular meeting minutes of October 15th, October 15th, 2024.
Make a motion to approve regular meeting minutes for October 15th, 2024.
And everyone was in attendance, so is there any is there a second?
Second,
Questions, comments, corrections? Thank you, Tamika. Roll call, Harry?
second, aye.
Ledger, aye.
Galvin, aye.
Whitman, aye. We have the executive session meeting minutes for the start of that meeting. This was the collective bargaining agreement between the firefighters union IAFF local 4878. Since we have a pile of these to release, should we just hold them for now and release them all at once, or should we just go ahead and release these?
I would just release this set, cause there really isn't anything in there of concern once it is released, and then I can go back and take an inventory and see if, ones that we can look to release.
Yeah, if you don't mind, maybe, because I know we're a little bit behind on releasing some, so. Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the executive session minutes from October 15th to be released at this time.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Any conversation? Roll call, Harry?
second, aye.
Ledger, aye.
Galvin, aye.
Whitman, aye. Thank you. I know that we were expecting a guest for public comment.
That was my fault, I got the date wrong, she's gonna be coming to our November 12th meeting.
Okay.
That was my mistake.
That's totally fine, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't.
Yes, absolutely.
Is there anyone else here for public comment? I don't see anyone on Zoom either. Okay. Moving into communication member comments, announcements, and town administrator update. I have a few things to address. I wanna thank everyone for their patience. Palmagussit Road is open. The dam is crazy, it's done. I don't know if you've driven down there or not, but it was a big project. I think Palmagussit will still be paved, hopefully by the end of the calendar year is the plan. And so we'll need a little bit more patience as the planning for the paving is underway. But then we'll have a nice new road and dam and everything going into the winter. Thank you everyone for your patience on that. Early voting is still happening through this Friday, November 1st at 12:30. The specific hours are posted on the website. I believe they are to make it 8:30 to 4:30.
8 to 4:30.
Okay, 8 to 4:30 in town hall. And again, that's through Friday, the November 1st at 12:30 in the afternoon. Tomorrow is the last day to request a vote by mail application, I believe. So if anyone is looking to vote by mail, you have until tomorrow to request that. Trunk or treats being sponsored by dispatch is 4 to 6 p.m. I believe on the Common and Public Safety Building on trick or treat or on Halloween, Thursday the 31st. It's gonna be a fun time. I think there's a bunch of businesses and town groups that are setting up on the Common and handing out candy. And I believe Public Safety has some fun plans as well. So that'll be a lot of fun. And trick or treat hours are 5 to 8 p.m. that same night, Halloween night, the 31st. We have, our veterans agent is coordinating a Veterans Day program. So she is not coordinating but has invited everyone to a pancake breakfast, a veterans thank you breakfast, pancake breakfast in Oakham on Saturday, November 9th. That's from 9 to 11 a.m. at Oakham Fire Department. The information is posted on the website, as well as the town sign, and we have social media posts scheduled, and I said it's on the website as well. I believe there might be some flyers around town also,
Yes, there are.
at the building on Glenwood, Town Hall, probably here at the library, the annex. So if you're interested, please, that's in Oakham. Then on Sunday, there's a Veterans Day event in Rutland we have an invitation. The town of Rutland cordially invites all to a rededication of the town's veteran honor roll. An additional 16 names have been recently added to the honor roll, which is located on the Rutland Upper Common since its dedication Veterans Day 2023. The ceremony will take place on Sunday, November 10th, 2024 at 1 p.m. on the Rutland Upper Common. It will be held rain or shine. The ceremony will honor the additional service members from Rutland added to the plaque who served our country during the Persian Gulf, War on Terror, and Vietnam timeframes. There will be refreshments immediately following in the Congregational Church at the Lower Common. And it is with heartfelt appreciation that we thank all for their service to our country. That information is also posted on the same place as our website, social media, flyers around town, the electronic sign as well. So then Veterans Day is that Monday, November 11th. So that's a town holiday, it's a federal holiday, so town offices will be closed. So plan accordingly. And just to keep everyone, it on everyone's radar, we have the special town meeting scheduled for Thursday, November 21st at 6 p.m. at the Glenwood Elementary School. We had the warrant study meeting on Thursday last week, and we are looking later this evening to sign the warrant and get that posted for the public. Do any other members have any comments, updates, anything? So, okay, thank you.
It's pretty well covered.
It's a lot this time, I think. Moving in, Austin, I think we have your town administrator update.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Just a few updates. I will dispense with a written update as I have a fairly large presentation that I'll ask to present at the end of new business tonight, just to save time for all the other topics. But just to go through a few items of importance, just again, as the chair mentioned, want to thank the public for their patience with the Palmagussit Road project. Obviously, took a little bit longer than I think we all expected or desired, so again, just want to thank everyone for their patience and thank Mass DOT and the contractor for getting it done a few days earlier than they promised as well. There will be paving beginning November 11th for the entire stretch of the project, so during paving, there'll be probably single lane closures while paving is done. And then closing out some aspects, there's some cleanup that needs to be done at the intersection at Miles Road and some other aspects to the project. But as the chair mentioned, looking to totally close out the project 10 months early by the end of this calendar year. Just before tonight's meeting, I attended a Board of Health meeting to discuss regional trash. More so, the Board of Health needs to update their hauler rules and regulations in anticipation of our potential procurement process. There will be, as I mentioned at the last select board meeting, a virtual meeting this Wednesday at 6 p.m. With the licensed haulers in each of the three communities, more so to get their feedback about potentially working with each of the three communities for a regional curbside pickup program. You may have noticed on Memorial Drive, DPW and a local contractor did some improvements to the municipal parking lot off of Memorial Drive. And we also installed a new walkway connecting Memorial Drive, the parking lot, to the town pool house. This is after extensive amount of feedback from residents and folks who attend the town pool over the summer. Especially while the town hall parking lot was closed and we were asking folks to park on Memorial Drive, there's really not an accessible way to get there. So we did install that walkway and DPW will do some cleanup over the next few days just on the edges of it. But wanna thank them for that. Looks great. We sent a picture out on social media earlier today. And then finally, this is more just wanna see if the board is available. Your next regularly scheduled meeting is actually the week of Thanksgiving. I think it's November 25th. Town Finance is potentially asking if the board is willing to move that meeting 1 week later to December 2nd, as we're looking to schedule a tax classification hearing, which is typically done right around that time frame, usually the second week of December. We're looking to get it done 1 week earlier, just one, to get it done. And two, just based off of timing when we're expecting to submit all the materials to Department of Revenue. Just one thing to consider, if you do move from the 25th, the board will need to designate one board member to sign the payroll and vendor warrant. Because obviously that's a week that we all wanna get paid and need to pay our vendors. So not asking for any action item tonight, just potentially for our next meeting, if the board can check their schedules and see what works best, and then we'll plan accordingly. And that's it.
In theory, we could also sign the warrant, treasury warrant and payroll at the meeting that we usually hold prior to special town meeting, correct?
If the warrant will be ready.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it would be.
Might not be ready by then.
I know usually we have until Monday. I wasn't sure with Donna's extended hours. Okay. Thank you, Austin. Does anyone have any questions or comments for anything that Austin has presented thus far?
Just one quick question, Austin, if I may. I think you did mention, were they going to stripe that parking lot?
Yes, yeah, so there'll also be, I know you guys asked earlier for the Wood Studio, the intent is to do striping
Everything.
both at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Before we get into some of the sub-pieces, the town charter, the municipal services facility, and move on, we have Sabrina Hylanoma here from Central Tree Middle School. I was wondering if the board would be amenable to taking this piece of new business, it's part C, out of order and do that now so she doesn't have to sit through the longer presentations and conversation. She's more than welcome to.
I'm more than willing to. I'm here.
Is the board amenable to that? Is there any?
Yeah. I don't think we know vote on that, do we?
No.
So, hello, Sabrina Heinaluma, Secretary of Central Tree Middle School, and Rutland resident, Edson Ave. We are looking to put 2 vinyl banners similar to the ones that the Harmony Homes has on the fence down at the Maple Ave, which is now the new entrance to Central Tree Middle School. We have a lot of confusion with buses from other towns coming in for sports, and even our own parents still coming down from Naquag to get to Central Tree, and you can't go that way anymore. So we're looking to have, I believe the banner that Harmony Homes has is 4 by 8. So to be consistent with height, I think 4, I don't think it needs to be 8 feet, so maybe 6, 4 by 6, just so it's visible. On the left and the right, so if you're coming from Paxton or you're coming from the center of town, you can see that that's our new entrance. The only other one that we were looking to add, there is, when you pull into Naquag, there's a small 24 by 18 like street sign, almost worn away, you can't even read it now, but it says Naquag right, Central Tree straight, which is not true anymore. So there's a picture of a smaller sign that just says no entrance to Central Tree Middle School, please use Maple Ave entrance, and then when they go on Maple Ave, they will then see signs that say main entrance. And then we would put a temporary one inside the standing one that's there. just saying the same thing, so that you can see it when you're on Main Street. So we're just looking for the approval until the time comes where we can put a new, permanent sign down the end of that road.
And is this PTO funding, is it school funding, is it town funding?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. Mark Wild had asked the same question. I do have a price that I did ask from somebody that I believe we're both have as vendors on our.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the PTO is more than willing to fund it,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, I know that that's gonna be a question.
Right, yeah.
I think it's warranted. I know having kids there and just seeing the amount of traffic when I drive through, that I think that it's definitely warranted and justified for sure, but as far as the spending piece.
So just looking for approval if there's anything size-wise or, you know, that you don't want listed on there, we can edit it. I'm thinking the white sign over the green sign because I think the green might get hidden with the trees and everything behind it. It might not be as visible and then with fading or anything. So I think the white would probably pop and make it more visible.
Yeah. That was gonna be my next question is, are you looking for kind of direction on the color of the sign also?
Yeah, I didn't know if anybody had an opinion on it, but I think that the white just might work better for visibility wise.
Stands out.
Yeah, and I definitely wanna put it on the fence because it's gonna blow down, the snow's gonna get over it, so if we have it up on the fence, then,
Yeah.
you know.
My only question on the smaller signs,
Yep.
the kind of no access.
Yep.
Is it worth saying, please, instead of Main Street entrance or something, putting the actual address of and it's please use on Maple Ave, but at whatever address Maple Ave instead.
Like 80, I think it's 83 Maple Ave.
I'm just thinking if somebody's putting their GPS.
To Maple Ave, right.
Is it gonna take you that way though?
Well, that's the problem with the
Yeah.
GPS, it might just take you down that road. So my hope is that they'll be like, oh, Maple Ave, and then they'll see those big signs and say, oh, okay, this is the main entrance.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We've been telling people, just put 83 Maple Ave in your GPS and, you know,
It'll get you there.
it'll get you there, but there's
Yeah.
so many random people that are coming to our school that
Yeah.
FedEx is loving it. You know, they have to go to Naquag, they can't come down to us anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah, does the board have any questions, concerns, direction for Sabrina, for the schools, for the town?
I have one, I guess. I'm totally fine with everything here. I agree with everything that you've said. My question is maybe more, Austin, for you, just hearing all of this. Is there any consideration at one point to changing the address of the school, if that's going to be permanent
Yeah, so
entrance?
that's something that we're actually working to potentially have ready for annual town meeting is
Okay.
actually converting the driveway between Naquag and the middle school actually to a public way, which would then actually properly give the middle school an address. I think it's what's the current address?
281 Main Street.
Main Street.
Yeah.
But it doesn't,
It's not on Main
anywhere
Street.
close to Main Street. So, but there's some work
To do that, okay.
to do that, so that's one of the police chief's requests is to actually go through that process this winter to get that ready for annual town meeting.
Brilliant, okay, perfect, thank you.
And I think that conversation's been on and off the radar, and I think there's some consideration as far as what it would take to get the driveway up to road standards. Now that it's designated as one way, I think it's a little bit maybe easier. I don't know for sure. And then also the impacts because there's wetlands and everything there. So just to make sure that everything is covered, I think. But I know it's not a new conversation, it comes to cycle. Thank you, Austin.
Question?
Sure.
No access to Central Tree. Where were you gonna put these signs?
So there's when you pull into Naquag, there's one, I didn't take a picture of it, but there's one sign that's just on the corner in the ground, 24 by 18, that just has an arrow pointing straight ahead to get to Central Tree, but it's now one way, so you can't go down there. And then the other one, you'll see on Main Street, there's like a letterboard sign that you can put letters in. So just for a while, until people get used to it, we were just gonna have that one inside there that says no access to Central Tree.
Okay,
Cause the sign right now says Naquag and Central Tree.
okay. off the wall question, home of the Bobcats, I did not know they were
Yeah.
the home of the Bobcats.
Bobcats, yeah,
Just the middle school,
just the middle school,
okay?
yeah. Central Tree Bobcats.
So I would entertain, if the board is amenable,
Yes,
it
there it
sounds
is,
like
thank
it.
you.
Oh yeah, there's the
That's the
little
little
sign.
sign.
there, yeah.
Tiny sign.
And you can, if you pan to the side, you should be, if you're on live, you should be able to see the big sign towards Main Street.
Oh, yeah,
Other
this
way.
one, this one.
See that one? We're just gonna
Yeah,
put the
that
little
one
one
still says
inside there.
Central Tree.
People may not see it, but you know, they can't say we didn't tell them.
Thank you. So I would entertain a motion to approve the Central Tree Middle School signage as presented with the white design. It sounds like that's kind of the preference of the school and administration as well as what I think makes the most sense from the board perspective.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Conversation, questions?
I think just my only note that if there's any funding needed from the town, that obviously is come back this way, so
Yeah.
otherwise.
All right, roll call, Harry.
Second I.
Ledger I.
Galvin I.
Whitman, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking me early.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye Sabrina.
Moving back, Austin, I think you had mentioned that you were comfortable holding the municipal services facility space needs analysis and feasibility study until the end after we get through everything else. So we can move into the town charter continue discussion if you're okay with that and the board's amenable to that. I believe last time we had some additional questions. Austin, thank you for doing some of that research as far as the regional school piece and everything. I don't know, like I would like to very soon, I was hoping by the end of October to have the charge adopted by the board and kind of the membership set so we could get the call out for members, not in a rush to seat the committee, but to make sure that we have ample time to solicit applications. So as for the charge itself, I'm not sure if there were concerns about the charge. I know, if I remember correctly, the kind of conversation has mostly been about the membership piece. And whether or not we designate members from specific boards and committees or not. I did just go back and read the FinCom bylaw again. And it explicitly says that no member may act as a town official as defined in Chapter 1, Article 1 in any capacity other than service on the committee for the FinCom bylaw. That's very explicit in the FinCom bylaw. I know in the past when I talked, before the new bylaws were accepted, when I talked to FinCom, and kind of tried to explain what I thought to be a valuable piece to have FinCom representation on certain boards and committees, especially ones that were appointed for a specific project. And
It's not necessarily
right.
talking actual numbers.
Right, but they still did not seem to be, feel that they felt that they would be in violation of the bylaw. That was a couple years ago though. So I think that was kind of the big sticking piece. I know one of my other concerns was, having elected board members on, knowing that that election, they can rotate depending on when their election is and everything. And so whether they stay on as a representative of that board or committee or are cycled off because they're appointed from that board or committee as an elected member, and then no longer an elected member of that board or committee. So I think that those were my two kind of discussion points for the board. I don't know if the board had other questions or concerns or anything.
I just thought I'd kind of along your thinking, Leah, is because the select board rotates, one goes on, who knows who they're gonna put on, should they even be on that committee to begin with?
So I think a friendly compromise, very similar to the Community Preservation Committee, that we could put a stipulation in there that the committee must be an active seated member of that respective board. So if a select board member, planning board member, school committee member loses re-election or steps away, they're also off of this committee as well.
I think that, I do think that, and I don't think it's uncommon to have representation from at least planning board, select board, and I wish that we could figure out a way to do FinCom, because I think that that's very important also. The school committee piece, I think there's value to it, but also I question a little bit of that as well. Just, I know that they take up a huge part of our budget and a huge part of our population, but also they have the regional agreement, and so I would like to see a better way to work collaboratively with them, but I don't know that this is going to be, I'm open to conversation.
Yeah, if I may, I agree, and I that's still been a sticking point with me, where if we're bound by the agreement, if all we can do as part of the charter is reference what the district agreement is, we don't need a school committee member taking up a space on this that another
Can I ask
resident.
I'm sorry, Jen, when the district opens up their district agreement, do they invite a member of the select board or the town? No. Yeah.
So last time that when they did it, at least if I remember correctly, it was just a couple years ago, they didn't really seek any town feedback, they just did it themselves and then presented it to town. Even to the point how in the section, in the example that you've given us from Hubbardston, with it defines how they're elected, in the regional agreement, it defines how they're elected. So with the restructuring and the weighted voting and everything, Rutland actually, I believe, has 3 school committee members, and instead of doing 1-1-1, they currently are 1 and 2. So that, they've talked about maybe doing amendments for other pieces of the regional agreement and looking at some of that weighted piece as well, because as the student population increases in certain communities and not others, they need to look at that as well.
So just maybe it seems like one of the major sticking point for this potential charge is membership from other committees. What if we just strike everything from membership shall include the following all the way until the finance committee, and you can determine how many members you'd like, but you don't have to have specific liaisons from respective committees, just to get rid of them all.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a little bit of where I don't necessarily disagree with having select board and planning board, because they are two of our big town business doing, policy. They are both responsible, a lot of their decisions drive a lot of the now in town and the future in town. But I do kind of like the compromise of saying that they need to be a presently seated member of said board or committee. So if hypothetically I'm on a select board and then I am not back on the select board, then I don't continue to serve that function, that role, and then the new board would have to designate someone else to go on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I agree.
Sounds reasonable.
And I would be comfortable with it being select board and planning board and then removing school representation. And again, I really do like having the FinCom piece, but knowing how the bylaw is and in the past conversations, that's a little bit of my
Hands are tied.
my struggle.
Yeah. If we were to put somebody else on there, I would like to see a member of the bylaw committee. Because we are looking at laws, we are looking at all that kind of stuff, so that is, because now they can take that feedback to their committee to work on that stuff, so that's one I would definitely like to see on, as a suggestion.
And just, I guess for clarification, I think the intent is to kind of use our bylaws as, call it, information starting point for what we want to see in the charter, but it's not the bylaw committee that would be drafting the charter, right?
No.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I don't disagree, Harry, I think they went through everything, they know everything as it exists today in time, so they would certainly be a good resource to have.
Particularly where I think most of the bylaws that we have are gonna be incorporated into the charter, which they already went through and did.
If I may, just a curious point. in my experience, sometimes it's hard to find members on existing committees that are willing to serve in that capacity on another committee. So my only fear is if the bylaw committee is a requirement and none of them have the ability to serve on that as well, then does that leave a permanent vacancy? That would be my only concern.
Yeah, and I agree having the bylaw, having representation from the bylaw committee there, but I worry about putting it specific in the charge. I would almost say we could go to the bylaw committee and say, hey, there would be a lot of value to one of you being there. Can one of you submit an application for the remaining 5 to 7 spots or something, and then the board would
We
take,
have to have one of them,
right, the board would take that into consideration when seating, is a little bit where I was going,
Right.
Or is there a way in, somewhere in here that if there's not a bylaw specific representative, that they could be serve as like an advisory capacity if they have certain questions that they would put something on an upcoming agenda to review and get back to the charter committee or have joint meetings if.
And that kind of brings me to, do we really have to be specific that somebody from the select board, planning board by law?
Yeah.
Or we say that these are recommended that we would like somebody from the planning board, that's our first choice by law. If not, then we'll just fill in with open seats for whoever applies for the committee.
Yeah.
I just hate to see us kind of starting from ground zero when we've had people in this town who have already been through a process. Because doing the bylaws was basically like putting 80% of the charter together.
The only thing is that the folks that are on the current bylaw committee are not the folks that
Right.
did the bylaws.
especially
That was the ad
one in
hoc.
particular.
That's the ad hoc.
Right,
These
but
are
we
all
have
new
nobody on the
folks.
current committee that was on the ad hoc?
there's one, Lynn, I think, right?
Well, and you will, so this committee and community will also have the assistance of the Collins Center to guide their work and provide sort of best practices, general laws. So they would be, starting from scratch in terms of, being Rutland's potential first charter, but certainly not in terms of expertise, and we wouldn't necessarily probably have them all Googling how to write a town charter per se, so.
And-
They would have that resource as well.
I think I have, and I'm trying to think in my head, I think I have a little bit of an easier time saying a member of an elected board should have representation on the charter especially, so, and I think as I stated before, select board and planning board both are huge drivers of what happens in town through policy, through decisions, through zoning, through all of that. So that's why I think having, and both boards are elected, and so that's why I think having that representation from those two is important. And then the appointed boards and committees, the bylaws themselves exist and are there as reference and were approved at town meeting, and hopefully it's an amicable compromise and relationship, but with the guidance of the Collins Center, I don't wanna be so hyper focused on bylaws that we miss a big piece of charter that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I do agree. Like I said, hopefully if we get this out and we get people that are interested, we'll have that list to go through to see, okay, do we have somebody from bylaw that's interested? Do we have somebody from
Right.
X that's interested, and we can prioritize what we think is important as far as knowledge for that.
Any idea, Austin, on hoping what type of mix we'll have, what are we looking for?
It's hard for me to say because I'm not a Rutland resident, right? So I would ask all of you, everyone here is a resident except for me. Because, a charter can be as comprehensive as you like or not, so it really depends on, how deep you want the charter to go, what type of language you want in there, and what skills you want in the committee to be able to make sure that that language is as strong as possible. So I would, maybe say generally the folks that are interested in local government, maybe someone with a background in law, maybe experience as a volunteer or as an elected official, or working for a municipal government that understands municipal government. But
The reason I asked the question.
That's really hard, because
We're gonna
the
put
charter
out-
really is
Yeah.
different.
If we're gonna put out who we're looking for,
Yeah.
we need to kind of describe what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And who we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean,
Why
so I would just point to, in the charge, it does have kind of an overarching mission that talks about the charter itself, a little bit of background, and then the duties of the charter committee. So like any other board or commission that we have in the community, I think asking folks to look at that and see if that piques their interest, and then going through the volunteer recruitment process, having potentially a discussion with the board about, you know, why they wanna be on the charter committee, and if it matches what you're looking for at the board level, maybe that makes them a good candidate.
And just to reiterate, I wanna be very clear and try to have this open and the call open longer than just until we get the first 5 or 7 applicants or whatever that we need, you know, 7 or 9 applicants. I would really like to have an intentional push again and again and again to get individuals who are interested, not only from existing boards and committees, but also kind of try to reach out and gather some new interest through the office, so that way we the board entirely is presented with a comprehensive pack of very diverse individuals that we can have that as a board conversation.
If I can ask for the board to think about this too. At what point will we actually establish the committee? How many people do we want on it to establish the committee? I mean, if we won't actually have the committee start their work until we have 7 members, 9 members, so there's a minimum we're gonna look at there, regardless of how long it takes to get them.
So I think we would set the membership when we approve the charge and the membership, we would set, do we want, I think best practice is 7 to 9 members, and an odd number is preferred, just so that there's less. And then we would set that if we decide we want a member from the select board and a member from the planning board, we would ask for that specifically. So this is hypothetical, I would say it's a 7-member committee, representation from select board, representation from planning board, and then 5 members at large, community members, and they could or could not serve on other existing boards and committees. That wouldn't be a defining purpose of the solicitation. In my history working on other similar boards and committees where we've been, you know, representation, the bigger the committee gets, the harder it is to make quorum all the time. And so while I would like the diversity of a 9-member committee, I think that makes it challenging to have quorum and everything. Again, we would hope that this is kind of a defined set of time, so folks would know that they're signing up for essentially an 18 months to 2-year process, and it's not gonna drag on forever and ever. But also that's what we would do tonight, or when we set the charge and membership.
Is this one where if we started with 7, is it just a board vote to increase it if we get more interest, or the board, if the committee comes back before us and says we could really benefit from additional members, we have more people that could commit? Is it just a board vote?
I think also we could, even if we were to say we were to adopt it tonight, we could say that it shall consist of 7 to 9 members, and then when we actually seat the committee, we can define the actual the number of memberships. We've done that before with like Council on Aging and everything.
Just
I
leave
think
it open?
Austin, correct me if I'm wrong.
Just leave it open to 7 to 9?
Oh, alright.
Okay,
Especially if you get like 25 people that are interested, and
Right.
makes it easier to seat 9.
Right.
yeah.
So is the board comfortable with the draft charge, mission, background, duties? Membership would say 7 to 9 members. Are we comfortable saying 1 member, 1 currently elected member or present? I don't know how we would word that, but essentially seating member of the select board and seated member of the planning board. Do away with any other quote unquote forced representation. And then the governance, and everything.
Is the planning board a 5-member board?
Yes.
if somebody is elected from the planning board, are they the ones that are in there permanently, or can they rotate in and out? Because
So-
I'm concerned that one member from the planning board may not be always able to make that committee, and maybe somebody else will be there and say, I'll do 6 months, or somebody else will do 6 months. I guess, 18 months for a 5-member board is a long time for one person.
I mean, it's the same situation for the select board. I think
Yeah.
in my experience, there is a lot of value to having the continuity of the same person going to the meetings because the work is continuous and being built on, and you have those, the work that's been done thus far, and then to have someone unnecessarily put in as a change. But I think that would be, again, if suddenly the select board representative is unable to fulfill, then I would hope that any one of us, if it were one of us, would come to the board and say, hey guys, I have stuff going on, I can't make these meetings, I'm sorry, can somebody else do it? You know what I mean? And I think that this doesn't exclude that from happening either.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying, if the individual from the planning board says, I can't do this anymore,
Yeah.
how do we then make that succession plan?
cause I would think that if we vote in, like Leah, if you were the representative, that's what would be listed as the select board representative for the committee, so unless there's something in here that says select board or alternate select board member to be, as designated
Right.
in those instances, would we need something like that, to your point, Harry, where,
Again, going back, it's 18 months, so
yeah,
a lot can happen during that
In that
time, that's
time.
why I like the word alternate.
I mean, unless it's just one where we know somebody can't do it anymore. And it just gets brought back to the boards to change who their appointed
I mean,
member is.
let's be real, right, 2 years, it's probably bound to happen. You're
Yes.
probably gonna have one person step away, so, but I think you'll just take that as it comes, right? When there's a vacancy, like any other committee, you create a vacancy, you're notified of it, and we do another solicitation, we ask the planning board to appoint another member and go back to the board and continue the work, but ideally, we have folks who are aware of the process and sign on to that commitment, but it's 2 years is a long time, especially if they meet regularly, it's a commitment for sure.
And of course, we're gonna have times where people are sick or they just can't make a meeting here or there, and that's why we have meeting minutes, check-ins, to, so, yeah,
Zoom
okay,
hopefully,
all right.
Zoom hopefully.
Zoom hopefully, yes. Okay.
Is there, I know we've had this, I believe, Austin, you introduced us to this before, I think it was the beginning of September, beginning to middle of September. And I know we've kind of had it on and off of our radar. I wanna make sure the board's comfortable, and I appreciate the conversation tonight for sure. With the kind of approving the charge as for the town charter committee and membership as presented with the changes discussed, which would essentially be keeping it open right now for 5 to 7 members.
7 to 9.
Sorry, 7 to 9 members, thanks Jen. One representation from the select board, representation from the planning board. And then that would be the two kind of representations.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there additional conversation? I don't wanna feel like we're forcing it. I also just would like, before the holidays start, and have ample time for people to think about it. And hopefully have an intentional application. Harry, do you feel comfortable with it?
I'm okay with that, sure.
Thank you. Roll call, Harry,
Second,
Ledger I.
Galvin aye?
Whitman, aye. Thank you. So Tamika, if you can kind of maybe do the email blast, in the next couple of weeks, or next couple of days, get an email blast out to call for memberships and social media and website.
Yeah, we'll do something fun, fancy.
Thank you. Thank you all, I appreciate that.
It's exciting.
I know, and that's a big piece. Austin, thank you for getting that grant.
Yeah.
Because that, we still have the free cash article if we need additional support from the Collins Center, but it's nice to know that hopefully that free cash will then be able to clear back to free cash. So thank you, I appreciate that. moving on, we have appointments and resignations. I believe we have a resignation from the bylaw committee. Gary Sarcosta has submitted his letter of resignation due to time constraints. As similar to other letters of resignations, it's been certified by the town clerk, and the committee has been notified, so it really just is on us to ratify his resignation. And then we can put a call out again for that additional,
Make a motion to accept the resignation of Gary Sarcosta from the bylaw committee.
Second.
any conversation? Roll call, Gary.
Just quick, how long has Gary been on the committee?
Since you guys first established it, when did we do that?
think it was
Around
February,
March?
The ad hoc bylaw
No,
or
this
bylaw?
is the new bylaw committee.
Okay,
Yes, he was one of the new members.
okay, so not that long,
No.
okay.
And it's states due to time constraints, so I think it's
Okay,
Harry, roll call.
second I,
Ledger I.
Galvin I.
Whitman, I with regrets, I appreciate, it's exciting to see some fresh faces and interest, so thank you, Gary, for your service. And Tamika, if you can just add that to the list of vacancies and call. And I think we still have some existing vacancies, I think there's one for Concom and
So Concom is actually filled now, but if folks go to the website, we make sure to keep that page updated. So
Okay.
if anybody's interested, it tells you what's available on there.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Then moving into old business, we have the beginning to review the special act to recall elected officials. This was again brought forward and asked to be held for additional conversation before the special town meeting. The hopes is that if the board and the community feels like it's a useful piece of legislation, that we move forward with it at the annual town meeting. We discussed about talking about sections 1, 2, and 3 tonight. We did have a resident and an elected planning board member send comments to us today as well. So I believe section 1 is that I can read through each section by if necessary, or we can just talk about if anyone has concerns with section 1. I hate to read through everything and
Well, he's okay with it, so we might as well just.
I was gonna say, I
That's
think
fine.
section 1
As long as he's okay with it.
one
seems
is
to be okay.
pretty just blank,
Yeah.
like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so section 1 seems to be okay.
Discussion.
For section 2, is there a conversation for section 2? This is more along the lines of kind of the grounds for which a recall could be initiated. So, yeah.
well, you each have a copy of my suggestions that I sent in regards to what to add to that. Which some of these, I don't know if they're covered under Mass General Law or not, I didn't have a chance to really go into them. But I thought that even if they were, they should be kind of listed on there.
So I think one of the, and this is something I think we all struggle with, sorry, Harry, I'm going back and forth. Is how much can we or should we put in versus just leave it blanket? Is less more, or is it better to have specifics? And I don't have an answer to that. I do think legal kind of more recently has leaned on the fact that less is more. Is that, I think kind of the feedback from legal, that the more specific
Well, one of the
the
ones
special
that,
acts gets, the more opportunity it can be to open the town up for, or the town up for a lawsuit or, right?
Well, I look at violation of Rutland's Code of Conduct. If you read the Code of Conduct, I didn't really see, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, any remedy for violating a Code of Conduct. So the violation for here would be for elected officials to violate the Code of Conduct would be for recall.
Harry, if I may,
Yeah.
did you, when you went through and were doing some review of the other acts, were there any specific towns where you saw these
Mhm.
specific ones, do you recall?
I think one was Coleraine. One was down on the Cape. What was that one? I didn't bring my notes with me. That was down, one of those were there, so I picked different things from there that came out of that. There were some that were even more than this that I got off the other ones. I think one was in the Boston area that had different language regarding conduct, but I didn't put those down. So yeah, these were not taken out of thin air, these came from all other acts.
No, I'm curious because
The only one it didn't was failure to follow Rutland's policies as established in writing, because that was the Rutland one. I thought we needed something there too. Cause a lot of what we have, there's no remedy there if somebody does something wrong.
I guess for me personally, and I struggle with policies. To me are best practice and kind of very amenable to, easier for the board to amend or edit or whatever. Whereas, that to me seems that even that anything that is policy related is tough to hold accountable, because again, sometimes we act out of policy because it's perceived, or the board perceives it to be the best interest of the community, or of town, or of the decision that needs to be made. And again, policies are policies best practice, but not legally binding. So that's where I think I struggle a little bit with, and even the code of conduct, like I think we should all follow the code of conduct for sure. But again, I feel like that has a little bit more of a whimsical ability to change based on the board. I don't know, that's my.
Well, I guess I say that the code of conduct is a code that you follow. If we're looking to get rid of a board member who's constantly breaking the code of conduct, and you know, we could cite an example in the past from one of the boards, that should be reason. If you do it once, I don't think that's a reason for, if you break code of conduct, it's not a reason to really go after, because we try not to be political. That's one of the things we don't want in this, is to go after somebody for political reasons. But I think consistent violation of Rutland's code of conduct should be a violation for repeal, for repeal of an elected official. That to me is something that says you can't keep allowing that to happen. That's why the code of conduct is there.
I think for me, oh, go ahead, Jen, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I think some of them, like, I don't necessarily disagree with you, I think there's a lot of degrees of some of these items, like misdemeanors, misconduct, misdeed, abuse of power. What qualifies as each of those, and who's gonna make that determination?
Well, that's for us when we write the
So-
document, yeah.
Well, but that's what I mean is, are we ever going to cover everything that could potentially happen? Or, to Leah's earlier point, should we just give consideration to not putting in any reason, and then if somebody really wants to take it as far as recalling an elected official, they need to get the support behind it for their designated reason, whatever that may be. And if it moves far enough, it does, and if they can't get the signatures for it, it goes nowhere.
Exactly, I mean, that's what I'm saying, but without this, some of these, you can't really use it for recall somebody.
That's what I'm saying, don't put any reasons in here, and they can suggest, they can
All the ones that are
pull-
here out already,
take everything out and don't provide any reasons and say that anybody that wants to initiate a recall can do so for whatever their reason is, and then they would be up to going through the process to get the appropriate number of signatures to
I
move
would-
forward.
I would say I would agree with you on that, as long as we set the number of signatures high enough.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think
So
that's
I'm
a
talking
conversation we need to
300,
talk.
400 signatures.
Yeah.
Cause what you're asking of the town
It's huge.
is to kick somebody off they already have voted for.
Can't even get 300 people to vote, Harry.
That's part of my comments for our other section,
Yeah.
yes.
But
No, I agree with you. I
that's
agree.
how, that's how hard it should be to get somebody.
It should be, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And, but I think
It's
if-
not, it's not a,
But to say that anybody can do it for any reason whatsoever, how do you justify that? Cause then we have to actually put it on a warrant for no reason whatsoever.
that means it has to be so egregious that you need to have that many people.
That are
To
upset
back
about
in.
it.
But who determines egregiousness?
people that
Whoever
are
the
signing.
petitioners that's submitting the request to,
I know
Do
that,
that.
but, so they do that, they asked us to submit the article, they write it up, we put the article to the town. Now the town looks at the list and says, well, what makes this right?
there isn't a list. That's what we're saying,
See,
we're
that's what I'm saying, there
suggesting.
has to be some quantification or qualification there. One of the ones is a finding by the State Ethics Commission is okay. Conflict of interest law, okay. Division of open government by the Attorney General, okay. Failure of a member of a public body to attend more than, that's questionable for me. And conviction of a felony involving moral turpitude, well, that's definitely, or moral turpitude. I guess you can look at that different ways, and I think that's important. But if we get rid of everything here, for example, failure to take the oath of office in 30 days the date of election. I think I agree with you, that should be taken out. I mean, you know, you can't even vote on a board unless you've been sworn in, so you're not even a member at that point. But I still think there are some that should be, I don't think we should, I guess, leave it up to whim. And the reason I say set the standard high for who should be registered voters or however we do it is, it has to be high. I mean, so if the board wants to get rid of all that stuff, I'm not in favor of all of it. But if they wanna get rid of most or nearly all of that, then I would say, okay, but let's set the number of people real high.
And I agree, Harry, if we are doing away with everything for sure the number should be higher than 50 or even 100.
And I guess I'd like to get the attorney's opinion on that, doing away with all that stuff.
I believe they provided this.
Yeah.
What's that?
They provided this language.
I know, but if we get rid of
If we
all
get
of
rid of
that,
the,
what would be the
Section
attorney's
2.
opinion then?
if we just strike
These are pretty
section 2.
serious.
I know,
And I would say, to me,
So,
Oh, go
I mean,
ahead.
I would agree with you if you were also add a VII, whatever that is. What number is that?
7.
Not good with
Yeah.
you.
7, yeah.
Thank God they changed the Super Bowl to actually say the number now. For any other reason, I would agree that section 3 should have more voters, but I think these are pretty serious, and most, if not all of them, I think all of them you can prove, right? A finding, failure, right? There's documentation that the member didn't attend meetings, findings, failure to take the oath of office, failure to take the ethics training. This is all things that can be documented either at the state or local level, and then obviously in the legal system for the last one, so. But if the board is contemplating adding something that's a little bit more broad, I would agree section 3 should probably also be higher.
And
Which leads to a little bit more subjective criticism, if you will.
And I struggle with adding, and Harry, I think I understand and appreciate where you're coming from with Rutland's policies and Rutland's code of conduct, but I think to me, that's harder teeth to prove or disprove because that can be a little bit more whimsical. And here, we're referencing the State Ethics Committee and conflict of interest law, which essentially our code of conduct and policies are kind of based off of.
Yeah, Harry, I question on the code of conduct, because as the chair just mentioned, I'm looking at it now. Tamika, I totally forgot that we're looking at this tonight, but the code of conduct is in your packet.
Right.
So I'm just curious, do you have specific, because I think there are some things that may be a little harsh to recall someone. So for example, if it's 50 members of the community's opinion that under community responsibility, a member is not well informed concerning the duties of a board member at both local and state levels, I think that's a little harsh to recall, but in violation of this code of conduct, right? Like how serious, or how I guess how far into this code of conduct are you gonna read so far to take to recall someone? Now, there's other things like relationship to other boards and commissions explicitly in section 4 prohibited conduct, but that's already covered under violating conflict of interest laws in section 2 here of the special act.
And I guess my reason for putting it down there is, if we're trying to get rid of an individual who has, in the town's opinion, the people who are trying to do that, violated these things, then there are some things here, maybe we should incorporate into this, that says, here's somebody that can do this, violate as many of these as they want, anytime they want, and yet tell me what the ramifications are for them.
Well, again, so especially if it's in the section of prohibited conduct, that is rooted in Mass General Law, the conflict of interest law. So much so that it raises that they've been in violation, they would be then a finding by the State Ethics Commission that they violated that. Now, obviously, it takes no different than someone initiating a recall process, but it would take someone reporting them to the Ethics Commission
Okay,
that they violated it.
okay,
So they would violate, yes, they would violate this code of conduct, but more serious, they violate the state ethics law as well.
all right, but or can we just take that, or do we actually have to go through the State Ethics Commission to get a finding before we can even petition to have somebody, or, see, that's where I get a little confused here, how does that work in regards to what people are trying to do?
Well, I
So-
think that an individual does have due process through the state ethics commission as well, right? There's a report, and then they're obligated to investigate that. And look, they have an adjudicatory proceeding as well, and then they come with a finding for or against that individual.
Okay. So this really, from what you're saying and what I can see, is rooted in that section.
It seems most of it, but then again, as you mentioned, some of this is kind of just like a code, right? But it all, I think, roots under or is rooted in conflict of interest law.
Yeah, I mean, some of this stuff doesn't rise to, in the code of conduct, to having removing somebody, but there were some things there that I thought that would apply, but since we're looking at 268A, that would cover this, particularly in the prohibited conduct, then that's probably covering some of the stuff that I thought would be egregious
I think so.
that we can do. So, if somebody wants to file a complaint for removal, then they would make a list, they'd come to the board, and then the board would have to go to the ethics commission on it. How do we do the process then?
So you can report directly to the ethics commission for violations of.
Oh, I mean, not me, I mean the individuals who are the 300 or whatever that are signing the petition, who want to have somebody removed.
I don't think you need to do that. I think
Not
you
for
just go to the town clerk and you file your petition. But that's why I think I keep going back on this, and this is why I keep going back towards, should we just strike section 2? I mean, I have one right here that's currently being reviewed in the legislature that has no reasons at all for Lakeville. Because does that open us up to potential litigation where somebody has a recall that they then sue the town over for some reason, that we're now on the hook for those legal expenses? you know, do we just keep it, again, more open, where we just state no specific reason, but just that your the filing needs to include the reason for recall and statement of grounds and specific facts supporting one or more of the reasons. And just not provide any specifics, and then again, in the subsequent sections, put the numbers high enough so that it shows that we have this as an option, but that has to be that egregious, and you need to have the support of so many people to back you on this, to follow through with that.
So I think if I can just kind of wrap back a
Yeah.
little bit, I think either we would keep it kind of as is, because these are all definitive findings that can be pointed to, that there was to Austin's point earlier, that there was a definitive, it's known documentation, finding, whatever, and that's going to be less opening. Whereas if we were to add something that's more broad or less specific finding and a little bit more opinion of or whimsical of a policy or not MGL, that could potentially, and I don't know, I'm not an attorney, open up for more interpretation on the law side of things. So maybe we can think about it, because we're not gonna make a decision tonight on this, but think about the board's opinion of, do we want to kind of maintain these specific high level of standards? And or do we want to, and we can ask legal what they think is a more preferential reasoning, rationale, from a legal perspective, or we remove them all. Now, going into then section 3, I think we would then wanna have a conversation if we remove everything, increasing that number. I think that those are something that we can think about.
Matt, can I, if I
Yeah,
may, can I also just point out, the language in here just says the grounds
But are not
for
limited
the
to.
recall, for which a recall may be initiated, include but are not limited to. So you can still submit for something that's not listed here based on the existing language. So again, is that something where is it worth even having anything spelled out at all, or do we just strike it if we want to include that?
I guess my first thought is, the attorneys felt these were kind of foolproof, I guess that's why he did it. And if we just let it alone and have anybody for any reason file a petition for removal, I think then there's an opportunity, unless we set this so high, the bar so high, there's an opportunity there for political abuse.
Agree.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's my big concern here, is we need to be able to govern and make decisions as we feel to our own conscience, and we should not have this be a fear mechanism that somebody doesn't like how I voted on one particular item, so they're gonna try and remove me from office. That's something we completely need to avoid with this.
Absolutely.
So I think we
Not
just
us, I
need
mean,
to.
the whole town, I mean,
Yeah,
everything.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to figure out the right combination of.
Again, I come back to, if the board's agreeable, I'd like to see what the attorney has to say about wiping all this stuff out that they prepared. If it's blank, what are our liabilities there?
Yeah.
On that.
I'm comfortable with that, Harry, for sure. For section 2, I just wanted to acknowledge Tim's comments that to specify that remote meetings are okay. That's in MGL now, I believe, that remote meetings are an acceptable option. So that I don't know that we need to specify that anyway. I then would say that we don't set a number of meetings yet, given that we're unclear as to if we're going to consider that or not. Moving into section 3, I also realized this talks about the number of registered voters to initiate the recall process. I understand and appreciate that depending on how that section 2 goes, we may wanna set this number. My initial thought was 50 seemed very low, and I agree with kind of Tim's comments that at minimum it should be 100, which is what is required for a special town meeting. I would even push that it needs to be a little bit higher, 150 or 200, just because again, to our previous conversation, that it needs to be,
Yeah,
there needs to be some
50's
teeth behind it.
50's
I agree.
ridiculous.
I agree.
I think it's way too low.
Yeah, that's too low.
Yep.
I mean,
This is a serious topic,
Yeah,
there
I
should be
mean-
more than that.
part of what I wrote down here is 10% or more registered voters of the town. It's because that changes, we have more voters, so I looked at Colerain, and if you look at Colerain, they have about, I don't know, 1,800 residents, and they got 50 people that have to meet it. So when you look at the percentage number to the people, that's a pretty high number, compared to just saying 50 or 100 here, so. And as I looked at other towns, and other issues that were in the legislative process or stuff, most of them came out with 10% or more registered voters. That was what I saw across the board, was
If I may,
10%.
Harry, I also wanna clarify, this is just the number of voters to initiate the process.
Yes,
Just to pull the papers, you still have to go through and there's a whole nother section of signatures that you need to get to actually get the recall on the ballot.
that's correct.
So this number here in section 3, I agree 50 is low. But I think 10% is really high. I think the high number is where you would wanna see in section 4, the next section, for how many actual signatures do you need to get? That's where you wanna see that 10% or 20%.
Okay,
For how many?
I didn't go through section
Yeah.
4.
And here the draft
because I
says
only
not
did 1,
less,
2, and 3, yeah,
Right,
not less than 10% of the qualified voters, but yeah.
right.
right, so if you get 200 signatures in section 3, that just means you get another set of papers where you have to go get more signatures to actually get it on the ballot for an election.
Good point.
And that's the one where if we do 10%, that's
600.
I mean, you're looking over
that would be
7.
759 as of today, so, I mean, and you could even up that
Right.
higher than that if we, thought, so anyway, so I agree 50 is low. So I'm amenable to increasing that, but I don't know that I would wanna do like a 10% number for
Okay.
this particular one.
And I think, I don't wanna spend a ton of time on this either, knowing that we were gonna go through 1, 2, and 3, but knowing that if, I agree, Harry, that if we do strike all the rationale in number 2 and essentially just say, that anybody can do it for any reason, which is fine, but then that threshold should be a little bit higher than, and even so, we might want it to be higher, because even if we keep this language in section 2 essentially how it is, to Jen's point, the grounds for which a recall may be initiated include but are not limited
limited
to,
to.
so
So you can still pick.
Right.
so it could still just, you know, it could still be, so I think that upping that number for sure is a good consideration. What would the board kind of be, knowing that how the process would work, it would just be to get signatures to be able to go to the town clerk and say, I want to get the paperwork in order to collect the 10% of 10 or whatever designated
Whatever, yeah.
percent of signatures to get it on a ballot. What's the number or ballpark that the board is rattling around in their head right now for that?
Well, what's a citizen petition right now, 100?
For special, it's for a special town meeting warrant article, it's 100. I believe for annual it's 10 or,
Annual it's 10 and to call a special meeting is 250.
It's 250, okay.
so I
If
almost
we
would,
call a special meeting, it's 250?
Correct.
if citizens want a petition to call a special meeting, so I'm kind of more along the, it would be a special meeting kind of level, so
Sure.
in that 200 to 250 range, regardless of whether we do away with this or not, only because we're saying maybe initiated to include but not limited to, so
Right.
no matter what.
Yeah.
I feel kind of knowing that we have the precedent of 250 to call
Yeah.
a town meeting, 250 in my head seems there's some
As the
logical
initial
rationale,
petition?
yeah.
Yeah, there's a correlation with that.
Yeah, certainly not 50
Yes,
or
I agree.
20,
Right.
yeah, definitely not.
So I think we had asked to review sections 1, 2, and 3. 1 is okay, it sounds like at least the numbers for section, under section 3 is most likely gonna be 250 regardless of how number 2 shakes out. And then there was Tim had some comments about section B, about the town clerk. recall, and I know that we had adopted the new town clerk bylaw. I thought it was until the town clerk resigned,
Left their office.
yes,
Yes.
either lost the election, an election, or retired or
Yes.
resigned. So I'm not sure where the May 2025 piece that Tim referenced came in. And I think the reason it's just, I'm not calling out the town clerk, I don't want this to go out that
Yeah.
that anybody's looking to recall any specific elected official. It's because the town clerk has so many roles and responsibilities and functions that's why it's outlined separately, I believe.
Well, yeah, because they are the ones that would process a lot of these
Right.
petitions, and
Right.
as right now, the position is still an elected office.
Right.
If that were to be subject, there would need to be someone to handle all of it in their stead.
Right.
So and again, we haven't heard any news, that we haven't received any intended plans for retirement, so.
No, and Anita's currently serving a 3-year term until 2027.
Right, so I mean, to me, I mean, when and if it gets to the point that Anita's no longer the town clerk and we are now at the appointed position, this piece just becomes null because it will be there, but in the meantime, to me, I think if we're doing this, it applies to every elected official that the town would have. Yep. Until such time that they're not.
Right,
an
and it
elected
says
official.
if the elected town clerk, so
Right.
it's stated there that, assume that essentially as long as the position is an elected position, there needs to be an option if it were to be that, that there's an avenue for that.
And actually, that's probably a good point. I mean, I feel like we look at this thinking about, our elected boards of select board, planning board. We have elected school committee members too, that this is also for. So for residents that,
Does this really apply to the school committee?
they're elected.
And the library board
I
of
mean, where they have a
trustees.
separate contract or a separate document all by themselves that they have to apply by.
But they're still
No.
elected by
Still
the
elected.
residents
I
of
know,
the
but I'm just-
community.
Again, there's that,
Peter Crane, Nate's Way, a school committee member is not an elected member of the town. The school committee is not a body of the town, and therefore this cannot apply to the school committee.
okay.
We can ask for clarification
say,
for
let's
legal
ask for
on that
clarification.
also, because because
My understanding was they were elected to represent our
Akron
town.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, I would definitely like to have that clarification.
Tim Norwell does, it says May 20, appointed per new town clerk bylaw. I didn't, if I remember correctly, there was no May 2025 in the bylaw? Or is there?
No, that's what we were saying, we're not sure where the May 2025 came from, cause it was just at town meeting where we made the change. I don't think it was even a bylaw change, was it?
It was
No, it
last,
was
it was a couple annual town meetings ago, I think it was a home rule petition, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to change the position from elected to
Just wanna
appointed
make sure.
upon retirement of the.
Yes.
And that was, upon discontinuation of service of the currently
Current.
elected
Yeah.
town clerk. So, yeah. And then on the back side, there's part B, or part C, actually, sorry. About the basically saying that the town clerk shall, has 3 business days following the date of a filing, to certify with in writing the signatures, of the voters in town of the date, that it was filed. I think Tim.
Voters are registered, residents rather.
They have to be registered voters.
Right.
Like, I think like almost all town business, it's registered voters. To serve on unappointed or elected boards or commissions, you have to be a voting resident.
Tim made a point here, and I think I see his point. To notify elected official of recall process. Looking at this, it doesn't say anything here that the elected official is to be notified. It says, demand the recall of the name of the office of the elected official to be subject to recall and the grounds, but it doesn't say anything about notifying him.
That's down in section 5, because the notification is only if they obtain, I mean, I'm not saying we can't add something here, but the notification they have in here is to notify the board member or the elected officer after all the signatures, so to know that there's even something that's gonna happen, that it's gonna move forward with, so.
Again, I apologize, I just concentrated on 1, 2, and 3.
So again, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be, I mean, if somebody's initiating a recall, sure, you would want to be aware that somebody's doing that, so I don't have a problem adding some sort of notification to that.
But if it's in section 5,
But that's, yeah, it's the select board that would give written notice to the officer.
So I would almost say that this section C is just telling that saying that the clerk's office has 3 business days to certify the voters. And then section 4, points to upon certification by the clerk, within 3 business days, notify the lead petitioner, of availability of petition blanks. I almost would say then that at that point, in that area is when the elected official should also be notified. I don't know for sure though. Because if the petitioner is being notified that, okay, you have received the subsequent, I'm using the example, 250 signatures to move forward, then at that point I would think also the individual of the recall should also be
aware.
notified that there's a recall process underway and initiated.
I'm just wondering, Leah, do you think it has something to do with the timing because it's coming from the select board? I imagine, is it not something that you can make a decision on until you have a scheduled meeting?
That's a good question. Right, because like I said, the only thing to notify them of is that there's been a petition submitted that has enough signatures
To
move forward with getting more signatures.
Right.
It's not that anything else is going to actually happen at that point, because somebody could get the 250 signatures, again, using the number. Get all of their papers and then not obtain their 10%, however many, 750,000 signatures to move forward, and it goes nowhere, nothing happens.
I'm trying to look at it kind of from all angles as a registered voter who
Yeah.
may be interested in recalling someone I voted for as well as an elected official. And I do think that there's value to notifying the individual of the intent of a recall.
Yeah.
And I feel like if chances are it's going to have been made its way to them anyway, if the requirement is a higher requirement, 100 or 250 or whatever number, we are throwing 250 around, that it's gonna make its way back to the person anyway. But I think that there is value to a formal process from the clerk's office documentation piece as to it's met the first threshold.
First piece, yeah. Who makes that notification though?
I would say the clerk.
The town clerk, okay.
Yeah, because they're the ones that are certifying the voters and everything.
So then do we, I mean, now we're getting into section 4, but do we add a
Right.
consideration to ask if can be a notification added to the subject of the petition being notified?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to go into section 4, we didn't,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, but just because I wanted to address
Yeah.
Tim, and I think Harry, you had a similar concern, I know I had a similar concern also
Yeah.
as to at what point we
Yeah,
notify the elected official, so I think 1, 2, and 3 are just that kind of initial process, and then 4 is maybe where,
Yeah.
4 or 5 would be where the notification would come in. I tend to err more on the do it on the earlier, you know what I mean, like but I don't know. Again, I look at, maybe it's a very egregious.
I agree, section C is just for the 3 business days to certify the signatures, and then maybe we can make a note for the next time for section 4 to talk about,
I just jotted it down.
that notification to the
So it sounds like
Okay.
1 and 3 are mostly okay, 3 is likely updating, increasing the number to 250. We had questions about 2 from a legal perspective as to what makes the most sense to keep it is the wording as is because it does include but are not limited to, or if it's better to strike entirely. And then if we can, how does the board feel about, there's currently 10 sections in total, the section 10 is just kind of the act shall take effect, but depending on how our agenda's looking, what's the board's preference as far as looking at a few more sections, knowing that how they kind of all mesh together and a lot of our comments are addressed in subsequent questions. Do we wanna go back if we have answers from legal about section 2, or do we wanna hold on collect all of our legal questions first? So review kind of the rest of the document in some level.
Firstly, I'd like to clean up what we've already gone over before we move forward, just to make sure that we're on the right path, that we know exactly what we're doing. Before we go to 4 or 5, clean up sections 2 on that. 3 seems to be not a problem.
So I think in my head, I would like to keep things clean, but also move them forward because I think section 2 it sounds like the kind of consensus around the conversation within the board currently has been either we're gonna keep it as it is, because it says but are not limited to, or we're going to strike it entirely.
Right.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, if I may, it might be more fiscally prudent if we send all of our questions to town council at once and have them answer at one time, rather than breaking it up into bits and pieces, and I think that might also help with the response time as well. That's just my thought on the back end of it.
And I think as we go through, even our conversation tonight, we found that some of the questions or our concerns are addressed in subsequent
Question.
or subsequent sections, so but Harry, I agree, I don't wanna leave things hanging either, so
Yeah, just only because there could be other subsequent conversation that maybe does alter these earlier sections too, so I think we keep our notes and we just keep those in mind as we continue the other sections.
And I'll be sure to document it in the minutes so that we can use those as a reference to go back to.
thank you.
Did you also get the school committee
Yes,
check as well?
Okay,
yep,
thank
I
you
got that.
for remembering that. Yeah. So again, kind of seeing how the agenda shakes out, would the board be comfortable looking at aiming to look at 4, 5, and 6 in the next meeting, or do we wanna try to look comprehensively at all the rest and then go that way?
I think if the agenda allows for it, it would be good to try and get through as much as we can.
Okay. At least an initial pass to
Cursory,
see
yeah.
what other legal questions we may have and then
They can then help formulate
So-
further decisions.
Yeah, as of right now, I only have one thing on the docket for the next meeting.
Okay.
And I know that will change in the next couple weeks, but there's nothing immediate that I can think of.
So we'll aim to go through the rest of the document and then we can compile a list of legal questions. And then we'll have an additional, obviously, conversation, continued conversation. Is that okay, Harry? I know it's not kind of what you're hoping for, but
No, I just think there's so much meat in this that we can try to go through it, but I guess I'm the individual that likes to concentrate on a section, get it right, get all the questions out, and kind of set it. If we can, like tonight, I mean, we did get into section 4 a little bit because it fed from 3, fed into 4 was, so. But I'd like to see 4, 5, and 6, and if we have time, get into 7, but definitely do 4, 5, and 6. And if we can get to 7, that's fine, but I would say let's concentrate on 4, 5, and 6.
okay. Thank you for that, Harry. Thank you for the feedback and the comments too. I think it was well thought out. Moving on to review our select board policies, we have code of conduct, town key policy, and the board appointment policy in our packets. So these are all policies that have been adopted from previous boards. Some have been amended by previous boards. So it's not necessarily to kind of start all over again, but just to kind of update and make sure that everything is in line with either current practice or what makes sense. So do we wanna start with the code of conduct for boards and committees? I believe that's I think maybe I have two board and committee appointment policies in my packet. Does somebody have two key policies, or does everybody have two board?
Did I give you?
I have two policy and procedures.
Board and committee appointments, that's okay.
I didn't give you code of conduct?
No, code of conduct's in here, the key policies,
Yeah,
not-
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I'm
That's okay.
sorry.
No. We have a
I
lot,
didn't do it on.
Strike two
I know.
tonight. Strike two.
it's already 7:30 and we have a lot, so we can hold the key policy until
Okay.
next time anyway.
That's
I just
fair.
wanted to make sure that maybe somebody didn't, I thought maybe somebody had two key policies and I had two appointment policies. For the code of conduct and ethics for boards, committees, and commissions. Harry, I know that I think this was one that you felt was very strong and oh, I lied, the key policy is on the back, sorry.
I'm back down.
You're good, Tamika. I'm the wrong one.
Sorry.
I was trying to save paper.
So, but going back to the code of conduct, ethics, and boards, committees, and commissions, Harry, I think that you were the one that felt that this was really important to kind of as a top priority. So, do you wanna
And this
kind of
applies across the board to all the boards and committees.
for all boards, committees, and
Right.
commissions, yep, elected or appointed, I believe,
And looking at this, I guess, if we look at section 4, prohibited conduct, that's covered under chapters 268. If you look at everything else, it's covered under chapter 268. So, I look at this, and I've read it several times, there isn't a lot of things here I personally would probably change, but I just wanted to make sure that the strength was there, that if there is a situation with a board or a committee that violated any of this, that there was ramification there was able to be some type of conduct, discipline, if you will, that we could do.
so, thank you, Harry. One thing that I just was when you had asked about if it was for all boards, committees, and commissions, I don't know that it explicitly and correct, I am
Other elected boards, right?
well, I just wanna, because it says the code of conduct delineates the areas of responsibility to all members of boards, committees, and commissions, whether elected or appointed, quote, regular or quote, special municipal employees as defined under Mass General Law. So it does explicitly call out there whether they're elected or appointed, for all boards and commissions, and committees. So that answers that question. But Harry, to your point, for all of our policies and even for our bylaws, one of the challenges is enforcement, right? And I think policy is really hard because it's kind of best practices, and Austin, Tamika, the rest of the board, correct me, I'm open for conversation. But policies tend to be kind of best practice in the way things should go, but not necessarily always go. And I don't know what an appropriate enforcement would be. Obviously, for some of these, it would be state ethics violations or code of conflict of interest or something along those lines. But for all of our, this is maybe a larger conversation, for all of our policies, how does the board handle if things are appeared or thought to be in violation of a policy?
I mean, I'm thinking ahead I'm thinking to the charter. And that's supposed to be a constitutional roadmap for us. So if we include this in the charter, but there's no responsibility to act on anything somebody does wrong, then why even have a code of conduct?
I would just point to your most recent set of bylaws, where there's now a formal process to hold a particular board or commission member accountable, that has, I think, also, due process as well. It's not just automatically the board member or commission member's gone because they violated this.
Right.
Allows for them to come to their appointing authority and speak to if they violated, for example, this. So while this maybe doesn't have explicitly the teeth, this is the policy that's overarching, and then you go to the bylaws that, again, were most recently approved, and you're operating under now, right?
Okay.
So,
Can I ask a question then? If that's all encompassed in the bylaws with the process, if there is a complaint or something to address, if that process is already now in our bylaws, there's, in section 2, you've got 3, A, B, and C, which says that essentially any conflict that can't be solved in-house goes to the town administrator for review, whatever it may be. Like, is that something where this section is not needed and we need to strike that and reference the bylaws? Or is there still a need for anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the role of the town administrator, especially with respect to staff, so if there's particularly a conflict between board of commission members and staff. But, you know, I don't believe that I have any authority over your appointees with respect to especially board of commission members. And obviously there's some members of town staff that are appointees of the select board as well. So I think that
But I think
Okay,
also
actually-
having, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Sorry, not to interrupt, no, I'm gonna take it back because this does say in their relations with administrative officers of the town. So that I see as if there's a conflict or something between a board or committee member with town employees, that's where this applies, but within the boards or committees themselves, that's the bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay, alright, so I'm good.
But I would also just, and I don't think that it needs to be in policy, but I think we often use our office and the office of the town administrator as a resource. So even if there's a committee, you know, some of the boards, appointed boards and committees, don't have maybe the knowledge or the know-how if they're really struggling with a member or members or anything. So just to say, what are our options? This is a really challenging thing, what can we do? And then it would be a reference, you know, a resource to say the bylaw and or select board or whatever, I think.
Okay.
On section 2, a member of any board, committee, or commission in his or her relations with administrative officers of the town shall endeavor to establish sound, clearly defined policies that will direct and support the administration. Is that to mean that each member, committee, or commission establish their own clearly defined policies?
no, because of that, there's also other aspects of this policy that a board member cannot act alone, right? So you, as 5 board members, are 5 board members, but you are the board. And that's, you act obviously as a majority vote.
That applies to the planning board? That applies to any committee? Okay.
Unless, for example, if you're delegated authority, so for example, if you guys don't meet on the 25th or 26th, and you delegate authority to sign a warrant, for example, but again, that's an action of the board delegating said authority.
Okay. Okay.
So again, this is these are policies and can be amended at the board, you know, at the board's discretion. So I don't wanna feel like they're the bylaw level that it's gonna take the meetings and everything.
When, do we know when these were created?
This was adopted by the Rutland Board of Selectmen July 6th, 2015.
Okay.
And it does not look like it has been amended.
Okay.
It's on the page that states
Yeah,
Mass General
I got it.
Laws,
Okay.
chapter 2
I have last revised July 1st, 2018.
of. Interesting. So this sheet.
Oh, that's board and committees.
Vacancies and appointments.
Right, code of conduct and ethics, yeah.
Jen, you said 2018?
That's what's on this sheet, July 1st, 2018 is the last revised.
So, and the version that's actually in the book is apparently just hasn't either had that amended piece updated or
I
again,
must have got it from somewhere to, but I can't
Recall where.
recall, yeah.
I did,
So we don't know what was amended to it at this point? We don't have that
No,
2000?
we don't have
there's no
prior
track
versions,
changes.
so all we have is this one, so we don't know what changed, essentially.
And yours said June or July 1st?
July.
July 1st, or July 2018.
I'm assuming we still have minutes.
Yeah, I'd have to go to the town clerk's office for that, but I'm sure there's still, yeah,
We can try
minutes
and
to
dig out to
document
see.
it, yeah.
Yeah,
I just don't have the original document.
if it was amended, I'd certainly like to know how it was amended or what was amended on for the 2018 version.
Yeah, I can try to see what I can find.
So, well, we have questions about that. I guess I guess for me personally, I don't, for policies, I don't necessarily, most of this is referencing MGL, so I don't personally feel like we need to know the revisionist history of these, but
Yeah.
if it's for me personally, but if it sounds like the board's interested in that, then that's okay if it's not too much, Tamika, for you to try to get the history.
Yeah, no, I can try to figure it out.
Okay,
For the town key policy. This is on the back of the packet, or at least the back of my packet. And this is, it sounds like it was effective September 17th, 2012, so it's quite a while ago. I think this has come up just as far as access to some buildings and rooms in buildings and everything. So how the board feels currently, I think, this, I think historically, it hasn't just been the chair of town sanctioned boards or committees. I think any at minimum, any select board member had been given keys. I don't know that that's still the case. I know that we've added alarm systems to some buildings and everything, so as far as, and obviously having more professional staff, there's less, maybe in some ways, less of a need to access some of the buildings, and more of a need to be able to access other buildings. The buildings, I think, they're not listed here. And I believe the keys are not kept at DPW but are at dispatch now, is that correct?
Yeah, DPW still, I think, has the master set, but for the purpose of sharing with the public, it's through dispatch.
And I believe sometimes, oh yeah, it is here that it requires a $20 deposit, along with identification, especially if it's not a regularly utilized board or commission.
yeah, I don't see anything here that even says that the select board is entitled to a key.
Right.
In the
It says-
town building key policy.
Well, and this is, I think, some of the challenge is we have no way of knowing who has keys and who doesn't have keys because when I was elected on, everybody was given a key to the annex and town hall
In the office.
and the office, yep. But there was no accountability to return that key when you were no longer on the board, and there's nothing preventing the copying of those keys. So I think the longer term plan, Austin, correct me if I'm wrong, is to look at a kind of keyless entry system for all buildings and rooms within buildings that the public or town sanctioned boards or committees may need access to, so that access can be a little bit more contained. So I'm not sure if maybe we continue operating unofficially, you know, I don't think we've been in anybody's been in compliance with this policy for a long, long time.
Through the chair, you talking like a code, you pressing an employee
fobs.
code? All fob?
I agree, if I may.
Yeah.
I also had questions on, you know, I was curious about the whole nonprofit group getting a key for private meetings. I don't know if when's the last time, do we do that all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think baseball does it, soccer sometimes does it, I think,
Council on Friends of Council on Aging.
yeah, Council on Aging, Friends of the Library, also some of the condo associations, I think, sometimes like I think the Maple Ave Condo Association often meets here, or used to, especially after the fire, I'm not sure if it's changed. So there are some and Scouts used to,
Scouts goes up
do
to
we- Do we collect deposits from them?
So the deposit had been when you would go to dispatch and
Yeah.
you would have to give $20 and show your identification to get the key. And then when you return the key, you would get your $20 back.
Right.
I don't know if they're doing it. You have to fill out the form and provide your name and address and phone number and all of that to do it.
Do they at least ask for an ID?
I used to do the Wood Studio for CIPC. I'd go to the dispatch, I'd get a key, I'd fill out basic for the town, CIPC, I'd go there, do it, come back and drop it off.
Yeah,
There was no request for money or my license or anything like that.
nothing like that?
No.
Well, I wonder if, I can understand, if they're familiar with longtime
Right.
resident board members that, you don't need somebody saying, you know who they
I've
are,
always had
but
to give $20.
something like
They'd
nonprofits,
have
maybe
to pry
that
it
have
out of my
rolling.
hands.
I just,
So I think
I guess,
I think it was there because there had been a spell where keys were going missing.
Yeah.
And they weren't getting returned, and whether it was intentional or not intentional, the building designees had asked for there to be a way to put a little bit of onus on ensuring the keys would be returned.
If I might, I mean, right now, unless things change, cause we're gonna be looking at new buildings and everything else, I don't have a problem with the current town building key policy.
well,
I just, obviously, new buildings don't happen within a year or so. They may not happen ever, but especially after tonight. Sorry. The goal is the chair mentioned, right, is to do phase 2, like what we did with the schools, right, is to do access control for all town buildings. My largest concern is we have no idea who has keys, and in every building, there's obviously confidential, sensitive material, and especially these 2 buildings that I mentioned here, but in every building. So the goal is to go to more of a fob system, which we can manage a little bit more and better, but also it aligns with the select board goal about, meeting room reservations, right? So you could still call dispatch or go to dispatch if you have a Saturday morning practice at the community center. But we can schedule that during the work week, that it will be unlocked during the times that you have your meeting room reservation, right? So you don't still have to give a key at all. The facility will be unlocked when you need it and locked after your allocated time. And then, to be honest, I don't see any reason why a board or commission member would have to go after hours to a town into a town building.
Yep.
If they do, if they're provided a temporary fob, we'll be able to track them going in and out.
I'd call you at 2 in the morning, I don't even.
Yeah. Or again, you go to dispatch and say, hey, I need to get into the Wood Studio for some reason at 2 in the morning. But as soon as they give you a fob and you unlock it, we'll be able to see that you went in and went out, so. I think this might be fine as it exists now, because I don't know if we can change all the locks if you were to tell me that you wanna adopt this anyways. I would just say maybe more so support, the capital request for the upcoming town meeting to change the locks, and go to a fob system.
I don't, if I may, I don't disagree with any of that, and I think that's the right path to take. My concern is, in the meantime, we have a policy, we should do something to start following said policy, and that means to define who needs to have keys.
Yeah.
I
But how do we get the
don't,
keys back?
I know,
We have no
and-
idea who has them.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
and I'm not thinking of it as like a retroactive policy, but, from this point on, if it's another year, 2 years before we get key fobs, just saying,
So-
we don't issue anybody any more keys, or the policy is you have your meeting time for here to here, or
Do you have a key?
check
Can't
it.
remember, when you were
I
elected?
do.
Gotta
sitting
get
in my
back.
bowl. I
Do
will
you have a key,
happily give
Harry?
it back to you.
No, I don't.
See, we weren't even consistent.
You can
Exactly.
Harry, you can have mine.
Okay, done.
Never used it.
Actually,
Yeah.
I thought a key would be important, but now it's been what, a year and almost year and a half? I don't need a key.
I think
No,
if-
after hours is no need for, why would you go
But
in
to the
there?
point, we have meetings in the Wood Studio, are there staff that are going to be there to unlock and lock after board and commission meetings that sometimes don't end until 10 o'clock at night, or whatever it may be, how
Like
do
right
we-
now?
Potentially, yeah,
So I think that's why the current process is you go to the Wood Studio to get the key.
Dispatch.
Dispatch.
Or I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you go to dispatch
because there's
to get
somebody
the-
there, which is fine, but then again, do we need to do anything with checking and actually documenting IDs, time in, time out, so you know who, contact information for that person?
So I haven't had to reserve a key from the dispatch. Anyone who's done it now, what information do you have to give?
But nothing really, well, because I'm a town employee, I work for the town, I'm a select board member, they know me there.
Right.
I've probably held 6, 8 meetings at the Wood Studio. Sometimes same as the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts are there. But you'd go in, I'd say I need to use the Wood Studio. I would try to, there was no way to reserve it at this point, except there is. If you went in there was a calendar on the wall. So if you wanted to use it, you wrote your name on the calendar and the date and time so that nobody knew you to use it. Then when the time came, you went to dispatch, you picked up the key, you went there and you figured, okay, nobody's gonna be here because I requested it. When I'm all done, I take it back to dispatch and drop it off. And they sign me out as I do it. So that's the current process for the Wood Studio.
But to your point, Jen, there isn't someone that's going to the Wood Studio after Harry leaves, drops off the key to make sure that it's, But I think that also speaks to an issue that we have with, which is a separate policy, which is kind of the building use policy, right? That there's also not really any strong language for town buildings on that, which I know is a goal of the board for the next year too.
And again, I think where I'm coming from with it is not so much to try and, administrate fines against people that don't return it, but just more to have a log of who's doing it, so you can keep track. We don't have cameras anywhere, in a lot of the wood.
Yeah, that you know of.
The Wood Studio doesn't have cameras
Yeah.
anywhere, so just, how do we know who's going in and out if we're just,
Yeah, we don't.
so for me, again, it's more of just tracking.
So I will say, in order to get any of the keys from dispatch, they're kept behind dispatch, and you have to go up and ask them, and they give you a form that you have to fill out with your name, address, organization for which you're requesting the key for.
Yeah.
I think phone number and that, and then I assume when you return the key, they match that. It's not that there's a revolving door of people seeking keys.
Right, they sign your form and give you the key back.
Right,
Yep.
so,
But of course, we also don't know if someone's made copies of the
exactly, I was gonna
minutes,
say,
right?
there's no way
So
to
to your point,
track
Jen,
that.
Right,
you know,
that's the other
we don't have any way of tracking that, right, cause that's beyond.
And even past staff.
But if I remember correctly, I thought on one of the keys I took out, it said do not duplicate. There was language, there was.
So yeah, some of those keys you're not, you
Okay.
can't.
So is it, I mean, again, if there's really no point to it, is it worth updating and striking out the $20 deposit and the $100 fee and just leaving the rest? Or just leave it as is and just,
I
Leah,
almost,
like you said, just these are more
Just
best
leave it.
practice and
I would almost keep it as is. The part that I was wondering is given now with the that we, because this was taken in, adopted or created in 2012, given the fact that at the time we didn't have a town administrator, we didn't have a lot of professional staff. And so I think that was some of the motivation or most of the motivation of the chair of town sanctioned boards or committees to be issued a key. I'm not sure where or how the select board key issuing policy kind of became to be, I don't know. But I would almost say that we do away with that because it says the chair may be issued a key to both buildings, which would accommodate for both meetings and access for mail retrieval. But now that we have a full-time executive assistant, administrative assistant for most of the boards and committees and everything, I don't know, Tamika,
Is it worthwhile defining who can have a key? So having a list of, if you are a department head, if you're, XYZ, these are the people that are allowed to be issued a key and just make it explicit so that you don't necessarily have a chair of a board or commission coming and saying, well, hey, can I get a key to a building? And we say, no, I'm sorry, the policy doesn't allow for that because there really isn't a need.
you need
For
to go
that?
to dispatch if you need a key
Correct.
for something like that.
Yeah.
do you,
I mean, the only thing I agree that I would update is community hall, annex, wood studio, or any other building out there that,
Town building,
what's that?
just all the town buildings that,
Or all, well, the library's a different story,
oh, yeah.
okay?
In the community center.
So that's what I'm saying specific to, I mean, if we wanna do an update on it, we could add the language of that and do an update.
I know of certain members of boards and commissions that have keys right now that may not want to give their keys back. And if we don't
Well,
have language saying they have to.
do you find that, and sorry to interrupt you, Tamika,
No,
do you
that's okay.
find that new chairs of boards or commissions are expecting or wanting keys? So maybe because this is still in the works, as far as the development of if we work towards an electronic system or whatever, that we,
It's more of a passing of the keys, if you will.
right,
Well,
right,
I guess where I would say it draws a line is where it says to the particular building which houses the office of said board or committee. If they don't have an office, then they're really not entitled to a key. So like CIPC, I don't have an office. We go around where we
Historical
get,
commission, yeah,
so I'm not entitled to a key, chairman or not.
that's true.
That's,
I think one of the other challenges more recently too has been, and I realize that the library and building on Glenwood are separate, kind of different entities, but that there have been meetings that the building, that there hasn't been access to those buildings or rooms within the buildings, that then has either been back and forth to dispatch or just relocation of meetings. And I don't know how best to handle those two buildings. And the space within those
Yeah,
buildings.
again, I really think this closely ties to the building use policy and my discussions with staff that work in both of those buildings, they support also a uniform building use process, which I would just again tie access to that policy.
So it would be
you may not
building
need
use and
separate
access,
policies.
right,
I would maybe just combine them
okay,
when you guys are reviewing that policy as well.
okay.
Because I think we all want some sort of a unified system. Obviously, each building has unique characteristics to it and may have additional policies for that. Sorry, Peter, go ahead.
No, please, I didn't wanna interrupt you.
Just, I think as work's ongoing for there, I think it would be helpful
Yeah.
to keep that in mind too.
Yeah.
You know, I know that there's very strict policies for use of these rooms, for example, that may not apply to the building on Glenwood and may not apply at all to the Wood Studio, for example. So I think for each room or for each facility, we would have additional details about the room. But still it goes through an overarching reservation and then key or access policy. Sorry, Peter?
So if I may, an element I don't hear discussed or considered so far, Concom specifically needs access to the annex and to the town hall because a lot of our records, in fact, virtually all of our records are there. And if we're going back in history, as I have done after hours, any number of times when I was chair, full-time job, too much to do, can't get there during normal work hours. Getting access to the records was an important piece of doing some of the work of the commission. Planning board and conservation are, I believe, the only two with records remaining in the town hall, I believe. Well, of ones that are not housed in the town hall. Town clerk has records, the treasurer has records, but they're housed in that building. So I only ask that as you work through this policy and adopt it to the future, that you consider that.
But again, you could still draw a key
From dispatch?
from this.
Yes, assuming that I had $20 in my pocket, which I was required to have every single time I needed a key to the community center when I was acting on behalf of Rutland Cable. So you need to have something there. There has to be a way that someone who needs access to information that can only be gotten from one place has access to that information.
Yep, that's very true. Every time cable went someplace, senior center or whatever, you know, yeah, $20 bill please, and, you know, sign up and there you go. So, yeah, but it's one of these things that I understood the policy, I really didn't have a problem with it, but nevertheless, you know, maybe a little bit more of a key type of situation given to certain people, key level that covers this, that, and the other thing would probably work out about the same or just as well.
I'm not trying to say you have to deal with it this way in your policy. I'm just asking that you consider it as you talk about revising the policy.
No, and I think that that's important also for access to specific areas because like if someone needs access to community hall to be able to look at records, they don't need access then also to the clerk's office or the treasurer collector's office or the assessor's office or whatever. So ensuring that the key isn't single coded for everything.
So I was just gonna add, to kind of tag along with Peter's comment, is that I know there have been concerns in the past about access by board members to staff offices, and sometimes with files being taken without permission, this is not in reference to Peter at all, and then not being returned, and that then became a concern as well. So I think that that's a piece to be mindful of, that if it's not, you know, general records that we have in our boxes up on the third floor of town hall, that there has to be a certain level of respect for the staff and their spaces.
And I think also it's, to me, just kind of even, and we don't currently have a system, and this maybe is again a pin for the building use policy, like what the notification process is, like not to say that that as Concom, you're not gonna be able to go and access your files at, 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning if that's what's convenient for you, or 10 o'clock on a Thursday night because that's when you're done work and have time. But that there's some level of in some documentation, like, hey, I'm going into this building to do this work, just so if the PD sees lights on or whatever, there's at least some level of documentation that business is going on.
Right, which again, to go to the point of go sign a key out of dispatch, so they have a record of the date and time that person went to.
Well, especially now at town hall, we lock it, or we arm it after each day, so I don't even know, are we giving codes to board and commission members, or? Yeah, I don't know. I set it off a couple weeks ago and Sergeant Freiberg came and almost arrested me. I'm just trying to think as well, I mean, so I think the point about $20 is good. I mean, I know like when I play basketball at the Y, and I wanna take a basketball, I have to give like my house key or some sort of collateral that I want back.
Yeah.
So it may not always be monetary value, but I have to give something.
Isn't an ID, wouldn't that just be?
An ID, possibly,
your
yeah,
ID,
something,
I think the
yeah.
ID, the challenge with ID is then
$20
if you're driving to the community center or the building on Glenwood, you technically
Yeah,
don't have your
Just tell,
Yeah.
just tell Freiberg, he'll,
Right? Dispatch will have your license and see you drive off.
yeah. But maybe, yeah, cause I think that's a good point, right? Not everyone may have the $20
I never have
to-
cash
Yes,
on
there
me,
you
I
go.
mean,
Yeah,
There's
never.
gotta be something
Yeah,
else, but
we could think of something
Yeah.
there that.
I think in the spirit of, like you said, moving things along, and I agree with your point, Austin, if there's individual building use policies that need to be reviewed, we can, it might need to be access changes depending on the building, like you said, so I think,
And, you know, I think we're trying to be
but
inclusive as well of, you know, if you are looking to use a building, and you maybe have a function going on, trying to make sure that that process ties in other board and commissions.
Yeah.
So like if you're gonna serve food, make sure we notify like the Board of Health or anyone else.
Yeah.
and I think some of it stemmed from some damage that was done in buildings and there was no accountability or tracking to that damage. Or there was arguments as to the root cause of the damage or whatever, and so some of it I think was instituted to try to mitigate some of that, but maybe it's, Austin, to your point, like we'll continue kind of as it is, just try to hold off giving out new keys to anyone. It seems like there's plenty of keys floating around anyway. And then we'll go forward with a building use policy and hopefully can get some.
Yeah.
Would the board like to talk about that next time? There is one that exists to start work off of. Does it make sense to have that be the next one on your list?
I think we can look at it for sure. Is the board amenable to that? Building use. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
actually was gonna, in the interest of time, knowing that it's after 8 already and we have a few more things, ask if we can hold if the board's comfortable holding the appointments, policy and procedures as well. I know that was my top priority one, but in the interest of time, I know a few of us have early mornings and a few of us had early mornings. So, is the board okay with that? So we'll probably do, definitely the board and committee appointments and we can have a first look at building use with the context of kind of start thinking about looking at it with a larger reservation building use key policy all encompassing.
And just as an update, I know the board at the last meeting had mentioned wanting to go over the street acceptance policy and the town planner has finished drafting it, has sent it to town council. They've sent back their feedback, so what he would like to do is he along with the town's engineer Kevin Quinn would like to attend a select board meeting to talk about it with you guys, to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and then he would also do the same with the planning board. So just so you know, it is actively moving forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I forgot John did mention that to me, so thank you. I appreciate that and I appreciate the board's kind of willingness to keep moving on the policies. Moving on, we have under new and special business, we have the special town meeting warrant. We set the warrant on Thursday night. I believe all the articles were placed. And the changes were in the there were just a couple comments on changes in the explanations that were adjusted.
Yeah, so the recommendations were added, the ones that both the select board and the finance committee decided to hold, I will place those on the agenda for special town meeting for your meeting ahead of that, because the planning board's hearing is taking place on the same night as our next meeting, so that won't work. We did update the explanations on articles 4 and 5, because there was some confusion as to that lien portion of that, so that was amended. And on one of the zoning bylaw articles, we defined what SPGA means, as well as on the marijuana bylaw, we defined what LME stands for. And I think that touched on all the changes that everybody was looking for.
Thank you. So, Tom, I know you weren't able to make that off random off night meeting, so I'm sorry that it couldn't be, but I would entertain a motion to sign the warrant for the November 21st special town meeting, as presented.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any conversation? Roll call, Harry.
Second and
Mattson, aye.
Ledger I.
Galvin aye.
Whitman, aye. Thank you. And so we will sign that and then it can be posted accordingly.
Yes.
And just plan, we will have a brief meeting, probably posted half an hour before the special town meeting, so 5:30 start for that, I think. And if we decide we want to talk about making recommendations on the floor of those two zoning bylaws that haven't had the public hearing yet, that would be the intent of that, and any other business. If payroll and warrant are ready to go by then, we could also do that, so signing as well.
Yep, and even though technically we have until November 7th to post the warrant, we are gonna try to get that done this week. We just have to coordinate with the constable because it has to be posted publicly in 5 places. So as long as we can get the constable in here, we should have this posted for everybody this week.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay.
We have a 1-day liquor license application from Seven Sols for November 9th. It's for the Wachusett Youth Football banquet, and to be held at Memorial Field next to the basketball courts. Everything has been documented, applied for, fees have been collected, using the new form with the new
Yes.
fee schedule and everything, so thank you Tamika for doing that, and thank you Megan and Seven Sols for doing that. It's for be a wine and malt only license, and it would be the November 9th, which I believe is Saturday.
Yeah.
From 1 to 5 p.m. Does not look like there's a rain date, and it's for families of Wachusett Youth Football.
Through the chair, I don't even know if I'm required to do this, but I'm a member of this organization, I'm the football director. So not that it directly affects me in any way, but in full transparency, I am a member of Wachusett Football, so.
So does the board have any conversation or questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to sign the 1-day liquor license as presented.
Motion so made?
Is there a second? Second. Any conversation? Roll call, Harry.
Second and
Mattson, aye.
Ledger I.
Galvin aye.
Whitman, aye. Thank you. I know, Austin, you have the municipal facilities, services facility space needs analysis and feasibility study. I believe that that's everything else on our agenda apart from that. So Austin, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. I will try to be brief in recognizing the time, but I just wanted to take some time to present to the board the preliminary results of the space needs and feasibility study that was funded by the board earlier this year. Obviously, this was just an overarching need, I think, when we were discussing American Rescue Plan Act funds, when talking about, in relation to last year's select board goals, the condition of the existing facilities. So this will kind of go high overview of the 3 facilities that were discussed during the select board discussion. So that's the community hall and annex, the community and senior center, and also the regional dispatch facility. For the purposes of tonight, I'll be just focusing on community hall and the senior center, simply because there's other discussions about regional dispatch potentially turning to a district, and we believe that that kind of deserves a separate discussion, and hopefully gets external funding that we don't have to worry about going to Rutland taxpayers for, right? So overall scope was just, as I just mentioned, just kind of take a look at the existing facilities. As I mentioned, also we used $33,000 in ARPA funds. Shortly thereafter, contracted with Weston and Sampson's Architectural and Engineering Division to conduct the study. It was a team of 3, 2 architects, and an engineer, a structural engineer from Weston and Sampson that assisted us with this process or study. There were kind of just some high-level focuses of this study, just an assessment of the existing conditions, which called for actual visiting all of the buildings and interviewing staff, which I'll go into a little bit further. Taking a look at the building and see if there's any potential for expansion of existing buildings or moving around staff reorganization. One of the things that was and is very important, I think, for this project is to incorporate any accessibility improvements. It's actually required by law, but for a certain threshold, redoing a building, for example. So any work that we would be done to any of these buildings, we would need to completely make everything accessible. And then obviously for potentially looking to spend a lot of the town's money, making sure that we're planning future potential growth, so we don't have to go back in, 10 years and say the building's way too small or we're out of space again. And also recognizing that as a community grows, staffing grows, levels of services grow as well, so we wanna try to program in that space.
I just wanna thank you for that, cause I know the potential growth piece is a piece that I think we as town do ourselves a disservice. I was going through some of the Historical Society articles a couple years ago, and when the new public safety building was built, there's documentation essentially saying that when it was built 25 years ago, it was built for the space needs then, and well within the 25 years, it would be well outgrown, and that's where we are, and that was, noted to town then, and so I think we do ourselves a disservice by not wanting to spend a little bit more for the projected length of the life of a building.
I'll go into it a little bit further when we start talking about respective buildings, but I think this study also demonstrated that there may be some programs or departments or services that maybe have too much space. So just also kind of comparing that as well, and showing that in the space needs matrix, that it's just maybe has a little bit too much space than what is normal for a respective department or service. So just a quick history of the buildings. I apologize, I lied to you the other night. The community hall is not 100 years old, but it's close.
Almost.
So I think it was built in the mid to late 1930s, and it actually housed library and town offices that moved in 1939.
You can apologize to Tommy, cause he was the
I
one
know,
that was.
I know. But obviously, we're getting close, right? Another, 15 years or so, until we get there. The annex was built as a new library. The annex, which is now town offices, was built as a new library. It's kind of interesting when you go in there. Well, I think some members of staff actually used it as a library. And then when the current building was built, I think in the early 2000s, it became town office space. The community/senior center was bought by the town in 1995 when I was born. Which was the former Naquag Baptist Church, and has been utilized for various purposes, but tied to recreational purposes, whether it's for recreation and senior center, council on aging, now pretty much exclusively council on aging. And then regional dispatch has expanded over the years, but has been in its current facility. We actually started regional dispatching in, I believe, 1984. As EMS dispatch, and has since grown to be a full regional center for Rutland and for additional communities. And the space within the public safety building has obviously grown as the service has grown as well. And we've absorbed police and fire over the years.
Austin, do you have any record showing that the town ever looked at another facility for the council on aging? I mean, if that was primarily created for recreational, and now we moved to council on aging, was there any, that you found anything that said we should be looking for something separate, leave recreational for alone?
Not that I could see in my eye level review. It may be there may be some history there that I just haven't found. But I think where I found this 1995 was kind of an overarching, I think it was a 175th or whatever anniversary book.
Oh, yeah,
which
275.
275, which just mentioned that it was purposed for recreational purposes of all ages, right? So, I don't know if, and that's I was a baby.
I think it's
You
how
know,
the
did we
warrant
have
article
senior
was
centers back
worded.
then? I don't know if we ever had a senior center back then. So I don't know.
Some of us used it for summer camp.
Did we? Yeah. But obviously, I think that there has been other planning documents, like the Rutland Heights reuse plan talks about either recreation or senior center space. I know that there's been informal discussions about, oh, that would be a good space for a senior center. But I don't know if we've ever had a formal like planning document per se that it's identified sites. So the first task, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, was just to kick off with the project team, just to identify the scope as determined in my discussions with the board, which pretty much was, let's look at the buildings, talk to staff, take a look at any existing plans. So a discussion the other night at the warrant setting meeting was, well, what other studies or concepts have we paid for? So anything I could find, I sent to the project team for them to review. Again, took a look at the existing buildings, taking pictures, taking measurements of buildings, just to confirm their understanding of current operations and any future needs. We spoke to members of the Council on Aging, the Friends of the Council on Aging as well, especially for that building, to just get their feedback as well for what they would like in a future facility. And then again, confirming existing conditions. So the next few slides are just existing floor plans for each of the facilities. So this is the basement of Community Hall. Obviously, it's not quite accurate because there is now a storage room that is used for recreation. But this is pretty much what it was. Back then, it was a meeting room, and then it's since become mostly kind of just a storage room. Right now, it's being used for early voting. But that is the basement of Town Hall. This is the first floor of Town Hall, which is pretty much the floor, only floor that can be used and is pretty much used by the general public and staff. The basement is accessible technically, for handicap accessible. You can enter through the vestibule, but the stairway, of course, is not accessible. First floor is obviously accessible by the ramp up front. And then this is the second floor of Town Hall, which is not open to the public simply because we do not have an accessible entrance. It pretty much was a storage room and still is a storage room. Obviously, Tamika did a really great job cleaning up. DPW also got rid of a bunch of stuff that's up there. It looks really good, but obviously can't be used to the public right now. And then there's kind of an informal break room. I would argue that it's really not a great break room, and it shouldn't be a break room at all, but it's identified as such on the plan. This is the annex. Now, at the time of this study, we did have a human resources office. So the corner there next to planning community development was the HR office. And I do apologize, some of these plans, especially for the annex building, they did not put horizontally. So just so you guys could read it, I kept it vertical, but that just means that the plan will be a little bit smaller for you to review. But these are just the existing footprint of this building. So this is pretty much the square footage of the town hall and annex. Between the 3 floors in the annex, it's just over 8,600 square feet. This will be a similar format to what you'll see for program space based off of conceptual plans. For the community and senior center on Glenwood, again, sorry, it's a little bit smaller, but that is the footprint and program space as it exists now for the senior center. Very large facility. One of the members of the project team actually conducted the ADA study a few years back, so he remembered how big the building was. But especially the 2 architects, they were amazed at how much space was in that building, especially the kind of the middle function hall, if you will, which I know we get a lot of feedback on just mostly because of noise. But it's a big facility that may not fit totally with program requirements. So as it exists, it is 7,500 square feet just for the senior center. And I didn't put any notes for cafe and kitchen, cause I think they're pretty self-explanatory, and restrooms and mechanical.
What was the square footage for the community, the annex and town hall?
Yep, so that was 8,600 square feet. Now, I obviously wanna note that, you know, I'll round up and say 4,300 square feet is, well, maybe actually, I would say maybe about 4,000 square feet is actually usable by the public. We can't use the second floor at all for public use right now, as it exists, unless we do an elevator or some other accessible way. So, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, some of the challenges are, we are continuing to grow, especially for our recreational staff. One of the challenges is especially they just don't have enough space for programming, but also storage. I actually feel bad that the basement of town hall, I think, could be a great space, but they just really don't have space at all to put any of their things that materials that they need to store. So it has become pretty much a storage facility down there. It's very clear as you go into all of our buildings, there's lots of deferred maintenance, there's lots of capital improvement needs there just to get it up to code or to get it up to, I guess, just par, if you will, and acceptable standards. They're not accessible. Restrooms in town hall are not accessible at all. We have challenges for staff, but also members of the public to be able to access restroom facilities. I think we had a staff member a year ago or 2 years ago that actually had to come to the annex just to be able to use the restroom because they didn't have an accessible facility in their building. And obviously, we're in our existing footprint, we are limited for potential growth to meet that increased service demand and any staffing associated with that. So, the project team, recognizing everything you just saw in terms of the existing conditions, came up with a couple of different potential solutions that we as a project team kind of agreed and decided to move forward in terms of just programming for recommendations. So, looking at a potential renovation and expansion of town hall, I think that was also very important in discussions with the board, members of town staff, and just members of the community that I talked to about this project is, don't get rid of town hall, which you'll see comes at a cost, right? Renovating an older building comes at a little bit of, not a little, it comes at a higher cost than building new. But for the purposes of this, you'll see that as one of the proposed solutions. Looking at the existing space of town hall, just to be able to move some people around functionally to make sense, right? So one of the challenges I think we have is if you are going to apply for a permit, for example, with the land use department, you gotta go to 2 different buildings for that potential permit application. So we wanna get like offices and functions together, and you'll see that also programmed in the concepts. And based off of the condition of the facility, and also just meeting program requirements for the senior center, they are proposing as a part of this project, new construction for a senior center. So, based off of the conceptual space needs, for this study, just for community hall, they're proposing, I'll say just about 8,800 square feet. This is slightly lower than I think what was actually programmed because there's also some additional mechanical that were, 10 square feet here and there that I didn't add. I just added pretty much usable space that we're gonna put either people, supplies, or, larger mechanical like a boiler or other mechanical systems. So, creating a dedicated space for safe place and recreation, which would be in the basement of a proposed addition of the building, and again, I'll get to that to show you the concepts. Putting all town hall offices in one facility, which is the lion's share of this square footage, just over 4,000 square feet, which would be in a combination of the existing building and a proposed addition. public assembly, right? We do not have any public meetings pretty much, other than like the Board of Health, the Board of Assessors. We don't have any other public meetings in Town Hall or the Annex, which I believe used to happen back in the day. They used to actually have town meetings upstairs in Town Hall. Selectmen meetings, I believe, used to meet, I believe, in the basement of Town Hall. But that was a really important part, I think, of this project, is to get the public back in the buildings, to be able to meet again, and not necessarily have to use other program space, whether it's in the library or the Wood Studio. I also think that that would unlock some capabilities, for example, at this building, to be able to do more things as well. But you'll see there's a, obviously there's a substantial footprint for public meeting space. And then making sure that there's adequate restrooms and mechanical and storage. Storage was a big thing as well, especially for records retention, from the town clerk's office and town departments to have a dedicated storage area. And then, I mentioned that there's not really a good break room for staff. Also, recognizing that that's important for staff as well. So, if you're ready to see a potential concept, a little scary, but we'll get there. So, this is basement of Town Hall. Now, I recognize that that's small. I don't know if I can make that bigger. Probably not. Can I zoom in? Can you guys see that, at least for the purposes of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Here, I'll get up. So,
You need a laser pointer, Austin.
yeah, I need a laser pointer. So, recreation really doesn't have good space at all. So this is the proposed addition, right? So this is the existing footprint of Town Hall, and this is the proposed addition. So parking lot's back here, annex is right here. This is the existing footprint, if you will. So this is dedicated recreation and safe play space. Large room for pretty much what they do now in the basement, especially when they're summer camp and they have to go inside. They would have a dedicated program area, dedicated office space, dedicated restroom facilities, additional office space for safe place if needed, to be able to do their program space. Creating a public accessible entrance from the parking lot directly to the elevator. Obviously, you see that they can't get into the recreation space simply for security. This is the dedicated recreation entrance from the back of Town Hall, the proposed addition. But recognizing that instead of having to come all the way up front, you would be able to access the building from the side here. Storage, right? So pretty much what is storage now would become a dedicated, locked, not able to be accessed from the public storage facility for town departments. Town clerk would have a dedicated vault. Pretty much no public use, just for town staff to be able to store things, and then completely rehabbing our existing mechanical. And then we obviously would have to upgrade the restroom facility that is definitely not accessible now. All right, any questions on the basement or ground level? No? Okay. Did I do that? Not yet. Okay, first floor. So, first floor of the addition as well. Moving around some offices. So one of the things that came up, especially the town clerk's office had a recent review from, I believe, the Secretary of State's office, is it really doesn't make sense anymore to have the town clerk connected to the financial component. So much so that they actually have to lock the door in between the town clerk's office and the collector's office, which makes sense, right? They have important ballots and other important vital records, and they've got the money. So really what we should have is like finance departments next to each other. So because of space, we couldn't necessarily put the accountant, but the accountant is still close enough to the finance department. But the idea would be the assessors and the collector's office, pretty much the reason why you're getting a bill and the person who sends out the bill, or the person who creates the value of the bill and then the person who sends it out, there would be a dedicated customer service window for this aspect of the finance department. And also adding various conference rooms, so especially for the assessor's office, they would have a dedicated access to the conference room, especially because right now, if you need to apply for an abatement and exemption and you don't feel comfortable talking with the assessors, you would be able to have a dedicated private space to be able to meet with members of the office. Town clerks would get pretty much what is the existing Recreation and Safe Place office and the Board of Health office. They would also have a dedicated customer service window. Team room is another small conference room for the public and staff to be able to utilize. Also could function as a mail room, which many facilities have a dedicated kind of secure mail room and copy room that's not just open to the public. So the idea is corridors are more public use and there's not staff materials or town materials there. Putting people in offices and securing from the public. And then town accountant gets much more than what she has for a closet now. And then this is pretty much the land use department, which is the part of the addition. Board of Health, Inspectional Services, Planning Department, massive land use department. So the idea is when you're here, you can talk to anyone from these offices. This also serves a need for, right now, the inspectors have to share office and desk space. The idea is, especially as we're growing over time, we're probably gonna have a full-time building inspector, building commissioner, and we're probably gonna have full-time health agent and full-time or more than what they are now, inspectors. And then at some point, which I believe is a goal of the community, is to finally get a conservation agent, which would have their own office, so you have a committed, dedicated land use. Our veterans agent also doesn't have a space for her records, and really to meet with people at all, as a part of the important human services elements, creating a dedicated space for our veteran services, and then fully accessible restrooms for first floor of town hall. Any questions or comments on that one?
So it would add,
Yep.
it's adding a stairwell as well as the elevator to the addition, is that,
Yes.
okay.
Yep. And that's, I think, mostly just due to code. I think for the addition, they would have to have.
Right, space, an
Closest,
emergency egress.
yeah. Yep. And then obviously that there's doors there and essentially when you leave, it's for an emergency purpose kind of thing. But some space had to move around too, and you'll see more so on on the next floor when they were trying to program based off of the space needs matrix. This is still, believe it or not, kind of a tight space. So they found that, you know, they created a conference room that was, let's say a conference room that was here that was supposed to be public, but there was no way to get to it. So they had to move some things around, shrink some things. Town clerk used to be a little bit bigger, but just because of the hallway, they had to move. So the point is, this is conceptual, and it's just trying to see if we can fit in everything that was mentioned. All right, and this is upstairs of Community Hall, fully restoring the meeting space, pretty much keeping the same footprint as it is now, but fully restoring it for public meeting space, being able to utilize the stage again for whether it's public use or members of the public actually putting on performances, things like that, or meetings as well. Just renovating our IT room, creating a dedicated space for cable to have a studio. So to be able to broadcast events in the entire building, but especially for the meeting space upstairs, a public restroom in this existing facility, which pretty much exists now, and then additional larger restroom facilities right off of the meeting space. This is pretty much where you would have executive sessions. Just another smaller meeting room to be able to meet with people with a smaller table, but you can think instead of meeting in the same room, you could just jump into a conference room and do an executive session. Break room for staff, kitchen, which would more so be open to be able to serve the large meeting space, but also serving the break room for staff, but would have kitchen facilities for the public and staff to use. And then space for town administrator, select board office, the executive assistant, and then another conference room meeting space for people to utilize. So that's the upstairs of the proposed addition. Questions? Yep.
I know it's ideally, again, knowing money wouldn't be an option. We've talked a lot about HR, so where do you envision any of that coming into play as use space wise?
Right here.
The select board office, okay.
Yeah, well, so that's HR office, so
Okay.
again, we had an HR coordinator when the study was going on, so we needed the program space for Ally. But I think, whether we just call this a general office for now, I think the point is, at some point, I believe that we will have an HR office again. Or if it's a different role, the point is it's programming space for a person.
You have something, okay.
And I think, that also happens, right? You may ask, why do we have so many conference rooms or team rooms? It's also recognizing that as we grow, oftentimes conference rooms end up becoming another office space. So, this may be a little overkill up here in terms of conference room space, but recognizing that, select board may grow, you may have 3 Tamikas. So you need space but you can't replicate Tamika, but you may have additional space for people as well. One thing I'm really proud that we're able to have space for cable. I think especially to have a cable studio in your town hall building, to be able to serve the public there, I think would be a great asset for the community.
I know there's been different programs in town through recreation department that have done like summer theater camps for the kids and stuff, and so I think having access to a stage that the kids could perform on, and not be at the mercy of the schools or something would be really cool also.
I agree.
Austin, what's what's the base square footage of the addition? I don't know if you mentioned it, I didn't get it, so.
Yeah, so I can get you those calculations, actually, hold on.
Is it
After this
basic?
presentation, I can get into my spreadsheet, but because I have the PowerPoint up, I can't see it right now.
Okay, but it looks like it's almost the same dimension as the original building there now.
Yeah, pretty much,
Okay,
It's just slightly a different layout because it's not a proper rectangle,
right,
but it's about the same.
okay.
I think, what you're also gonna see here, especially as we talk about, projected costs for this kind of facility is, once you start adding levels, you're adding elevators, or, in this case, one elevator, which comes at a cost, right? If we were to have one larger single floor building, this would be substantially lower in terms of, just the aspect of it. You're also heating and cooling more space. Any other questions on town hall?
I do have one.
Yep.
So this addition is going on the back. What are we doing for parking?
You'll see.
Okay,
Yeah, you'll see there. From the get-go, parking is an issue and is an issue with this project.
okay.
No matter, and that's why I think we're gonna have to, if the master plan is funded, we're gonna have some serious discussions about, is this the right site for everything? But also, do we need to be a little bit more creative with parking? I think the reason why I also mentioned tonight that we're fixing the parking lot off of Memorial Drive is recognizing that, I think a lot of people don't realize that that's actually a town parking lot. So that's why we cleaned it up a little bit, put an accessible ramp, so especially during the summer, maybe that's more of a space for example, the pool people, to be able to utilize. Cause we also get a lot of feedback from staff now for the current parking lot, that it's kind of filled with patrons of the pool. But, you can clearly see here that this takes a pretty substantial component of our current parking lot. All right, senior center. So you remember the initial number of, 80 some odd 100 square feet, large building? This cuts it to about half. But this is simply due to, based off of Weston and Sampson's understanding of other senior centers that are currently being built, matching their current programs like memory care, library, cafe, activity room. This is what they have allocated for program space for the senior center. Going.
This is a brand new structure you're talking?
Correct. Yep. So still, not a bad sized facility, but certainly not, a Baptist church, in terms of size. But this is, for, conceptual programming space. Does provide additional offices for, if the, Council on Aging or Senior Center grows in terms of staffing. But also just matches, especially, looking at the use of the facility now, trying to also make it functional. So when you go into the building, it flows a little bit better than the current facility.
And sorry if I may,
Yep.
so this is intended to be a dedicated senior center.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Alright, so this is sideways. Alright, sorry. So this essentially used, and it used the annex as a pretty much a location. Now, I'm just gonna be upfront, I don't think that the annex is a great location to build a new senior center. It'll be in the conceptual site plan. I just think we don't have enough space for everything that we just mentioned in a senior center. But in terms of programming, it's giving you an idea of, so this dotted line here is the existing annex footprint. So talking about what this looks like, sorry Tamika.
No, don't be sorry. I want you to chip on me.
What potentially the senior center looks like. Everything's sideways, I recognize that, so it's not great to read. But the idea is an accessible entrance up front. You walk in, you are greeted right away by staff. So you're not kind of wandering, kind of like you do now, into the senior center. The programs that are used most frequently, like memory care, the salon, pantry, are also kind of right up front. And then as you go further into the building is where you get into the classroom, right, or the cafe, right? So when we do the coffee talk, would be here. And then this is kind of the activity room where they're doing the workouts and Zumba, whatever it is. And that's in the back of the facility. The idea as well, right now, if you are using, I guess, any other area of the senior center, when there's a class going on, it is really hard to do anything. You can't hear yourself. It's hard as well for staff to be able to work. So getting kind of the loud part of the senior center far away from, if there's people having appointments, memory care, things like that, programming that in that way. Also, just reducing the amount of, there's a lot of restrooms in that building that aren't used. Obviously not accessible either, but recognizing that there's a lot of space that is currently allocated for restroom facilities in the current building. So there is less program space for restrooms just because a building of this size doesn't need, 8 restroom stalls, for example. And then a second entrance, especially for folks of the activity room that can come and go. And that is conceptually what they've programmed for the senior center. Any questions on that one?
So this is just expanding the annex.
Conceptually.
Yeah.
But it would be a new facility, cause there's challenges with the annex. I don't think the annex should be used.
No, I mean, I see where the dotted line is, so
Yeah.
that's the annex, and we're just
Yeah.
expanding on
Yeah,
that
so
foot size, on
essentially-
that foot size.
Taking off the back and building more back.
Okay,
This is why I don't think that putting this potential facility as a part of this municipal services complex makes sense. There's just not enough space. This proposes expanding the parking lot and actually putting a retaining wall, so the retaining wall actually, there already is one. It kind of stops right here. So we could actually expand that and add more parking. To be honest, I think the senior center should get a dedicated site somewhere else and make that more parking for the general public and for this building. But conceptually, just to show you an idea what this would look like, we put it on one site just to give you an idea. And we played around with different parking configurations for what you could do here, but also recognizing that we need to allocate respective handicap spots per code, and then make sure that it flows in a way that makes sense.
It's safe.
And it's safe, yep. But, you think conceptually, we could add a bunch more parking spaces here. and still maintaining this additional footprint there.
There's the additional square foot of the addition too, right? Is that,
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, so another 2,500 square feet. Yes, you're right, Harry, just a little bit bigger than
Okay.
existing. Regardless of wherever you put the senior center, I think that would be a great, and we really don't have it now at the current facility. Obviously, we have a bus, or we have 2 buses now. So being able to drop off and pick up for patrons of the senior center. Not just using the bus, but if, you know, family member or friend is dropping you off, right at the entrance.
I see your conceptual view. Right now, they have a parking problem where they are.
Oh, yeah, yep.
So that would have to be
Yeah.
expanded considerably.
Yeah, so yeah, and that's the feedback I gave, but we really just wanted to show you, one, conceptually what that looks like from a scale. Even still, obviously this is 1 floor, this is 3. But, from a footprint perspective, they're about the same size.
I mean, from a conceptual view, I like it having it next to EMS.
Yeah, so I mean, there's other spots downtown,
Yeah.
hypothetically, that you could put that same facility and maybe it makes better sense.
I know a building that houses a lot of historical artifacts, that if we could coordinate the building, what a beautiful location that would be.
Yep. So that's why if the town meeting passes the master plan, that's what they're gonna be looking at, is they're gonna also be looking at, for this programming, does this make sense? The answer's probably no. Getting public feedback, but also just looking, at other areas in town that maybe make sense better for this program area. So, the master plan is gonna look at essentially everything I just presented to you. Does it make sense? Can we put it there? Things like that. So it's just gonna advance and go a little bit deeper than what we've done and I presented to you tonight. But that is pretty much footprint wise what it looks like. I'll just mention separately, the regional dispatch facility, which again, I'll present at a separate presentation, is pretty much about the same size as the COA facility. Just it's a more modern dispatch facility, also definitely plans for growth.
Part of the master plan, Austin, is that looking at, if this doesn't work, potential sites where we can do this?
Yep.
Okay, that maybe we don't now, but can.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I did ask, I said, well, could you hypothetically plop this, any of these facilities on the Heights property or, I won't mention any others in town, but
Other open space.
open spaces or maybe not open spaces, in town. And they said, sure, but why don't we just show what this looks like? That's a tight area, so that's the scale of what that facility would look like. So a little bit bigger than what it is now, in terms of the annex, right?
I like the conceptual view of keeping everything together.
Yeah.
For the citizens in the town.
Yeah.
I do like that idea, but,
I just also.
well, I don't know if it'll work in that spot.
The other thing I think about is, again, we have no idea when the state's gonna touch that intersection, what a mess, like this would so increase all the traffic coming through town to get to that
Yeah.
new building.
That is one of the potential weaknesses is traffic impact. Parking issues currently as it exists. There's a bunch of other potential weaknesses, but just in our high level discussions, these were kind of the top ones. Obviously, so there was some feedback from members of the senior center that this is a smaller facility than what they have now. So had to put that in there because it was feedback that we received. And then also, with any project, you don't know what you're getting into until you start digging or start pulling apart something. So, whether it's for the renovation of community hall, are we gonna run into, mold or other hazardous or ledge? Yeah. I hear rumors from public safety department head that there may be oil tanks under the parking lot, right? So hazmat abatement. Now, when we go into the kind of the budget, we do allocate some costs for that, but again, are they enough depending on what it is? Potential strengths, of course, cause it's a new project, we have to come up with a million reasons why you should say yes. But it just pretty much tries to match all the goals that we have mentioned earlier, so I won't go through all of them, but some of the things as well, building and renovating a facility, you try to get better standards and better energy efficiency, so long-term, do we realize some costs of a antiquated building that is now modernized and has updated systems? If we figure out the parking issue, I still think that even with the renovated parking lot, there is still a circulation issue for parking lot, especially with the front half circle there. Demolishing the annex facility, have some increased space for parking or potential other passive uses of the facility. And then if you're building a new senior center, what do you do with the existing building on Glenwood? Can we potentially reutilize it for other space? Could it be more recreation space? Or do you take advantage and sell the property and make the town some money? So those are just some of the potential strengths for this project as proposed. Any other comments on the concepts as of now?
Was there any consideration to moving the recs to that facility? And not adding space into the town hall?
So I can say, I don't wanna speak to Austin, but I know in previous conversations, because of the pool and the coordination between the library and and NAQUAG, especially for the summer camp program and everything. They, and historically, I think rec has felt, and I don't wanna speak for Karina and Sarah currently, just historical perspective, because rec has been under a lot of turmoil. I think they felt very disconnected from the rest of town departments. And because the playground and the basketball courts and everything is here, I think they run most of their programming, summer camp and everything out of here.
Yeah, they can't get the kids there, you need to bus them
That's
there,
true,
it would be a
yeah.
nightmare.
And so I think since, like I said, I don't wanna speak on to what this current study, but that was previous conversation.
No, that all makes
Yeah.
sense.
Well, so and I think just to add a little bit more onto the chair's point, I think you still technically could use, if you didn't wanna sell it, for example, you could still technically use it for other recreational space. So do you reconvert it and does it become more of a public facility that is be able to utilize for rental to the public, things like that? Do you build basketball courts and tennis courts or things like that there?
So when we first moved, when we first moved to town, the building on Glenwood was completely community use. So they had indoor baseball
Batting cages.
batting cages, indoor soccer for smaller kids would run throughout the winter. I think there are basketball nets in there from the ceiling and everything. So it used to have, and the scouts, both Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts would meet there as well. So it had been a very kind of diverse space, not super well kept, because with all of that you end up with holes in the wall or whatever. But then I also wonder if,
I also recognizing that pretty much during the summer camp is like outside of the facility, which is great. They're utilizing the pool, they're utilizing the schools and any other recreational assets that we have in town. This is more so to be, especially for our Safe Place and Recreation Director, to have actual dedicated offices, so they're not sharing a closet right now. But also, that program area is, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is especially when there's bad weather, they're able to go inside, or when they're kicked out of the schools.
Vacation weeks,
Yeah,
we could do programming.
they have dedicated space that is also separate from the town hall, cause if you've been in town hall when there's a bunch of kids downstairs, it gets very loud and kind of interrupts the rest of the business of town hall. So giving them their dedicated space here. And I think they like being close to downtown or uptown.
I know some of recreation has tried to run some programming that's been like pay for essentially the cost of whatever, and has not been successful in finding space in town to hold something of that nature, like a paid for babysitting course for kids who wanna become babysitting certified or even CPR certification or anything. They haven't, because it's a pay for, because they need to, just the fee of the course. They haven't been able to find space that they can hold that. So I think having a multi-use space for additional things or adult classes, maybe there used to be a lot of adult activity, like exercise classes and stuff, held at the building on Glenwood that can no longer happen there, so.
Before I get to the really fun part, or least fun part of this, any other questions or comments on everything I've just presented?
For the feedback that you heard about the reduction of the square footage from what they have now, was there any, what did they say they would lose and not be able to do with the new space that they can do now?
I see, I tried to emphasize that, you know, programs that are in existence still have allocated space. I think it's just going from a really large a really large building, that, you know, maybe doesn't have the best layout and isn't the most efficient.
Right. But they have specifics as to what they feel they would lose by having a reduced space.
My understanding, and obviously this isn't, you know, totally comprehensive, but I think it's just more space, right, in terms of just actual building space. But, you know, as you see, this still has plenty of activity rooms, program rooms, office space, especially in combination or if in closer proximity to town hall. We've got plenty of meeting space in town hall for folks to be able to utilize. And then this becomes more true senior center programming.
The only thing I would see that would be affected would be the pancake breakfast.
Yeah.
Cause they need the whole room for that. But other than that, I mean, I go in there and there might be 10, 15 chairs set up like chair yoga.
Yeah.
And the whole place is pretty much empty, so I don't see a lot of programs there that need that kind of space.
But then obviously we've got the massive room that's upstairs in town hall.
Right,
That
That'll
maybe
have kitchen
becomes,
space and.
yeah, with kitchen space as well, that, you know, but it's, and obviously, I think we all agree that potentially the senior center next to the town hall campus or on the town hall campus is maybe not the best, but still, if it's in close proximity, you can still make it happen. If you're hosting it at the town hall upstairs, for example, you know, you can figure out how to make that work, but.
Okay.
Yeah. So, what does something like this cost?
pennies on the dollar.
Exactly. So, before I go to this slide, I want you to take a breath.
Is this before or after we buy a $2 million fire truck? I'm just curious.
Well, Austin, I'm gonna say.
At least the fire truck will be really close, and we'll be able to reach the top of this building.
But there you go.
So these are based off of, these are estimated costs, right? There's a reason why we have to dig into this a little bit more with the master plan. These are estimated costs based off of pretty much the cost of construction over the past few years. Now, we've had some pretty high construction costs over the past few years. I don't think that's dipping down substantially, but it's slightly dipping down. We're seeing a little bit lower costs in steel, for example. But as of this, like, the interest rates were still higher, they've since been reduced, but this accounts for high cost of construction. And also, as I mentioned, unknown site work. And you're gonna potentially renovate an old building, which you'll see comes at a higher cost. So, there it is. I'll go through high level what this looks like, and I'll give you the total. You can essentially add these together, but the next slide totals everything together if you were to do everything all at once. Soft costs are including advancing to next steps of design, but it also includes any project management fees, any permitting or testing, additional contingencies. So through construction, there is a design contingency, which you see on its own line, but there's also separate contingencies that as well that are included in soft costs. This is high level what it looks like for soft costs. It also talks about adding furniture, commissioning the building, things like that, that I just kind of summarized into that one line item. So 5.6 for a community hall, town hall, any site development. Now, that's also kind of as necessary because we don't know until we start digging, but that's kind of a, also, I guess you could call that a contingency for site development. And then the renovation is projected to be 4.9, that's completely gutting existing town hall and completely modernizing what that facility looks like. And then the addition is right around the same, but of course, it's a little bit easier to build new. So the total, this also includes, I apologize, within the design contingency includes 8% escalation as we continue through 2028, 2029. So it includes, if we don't do this right away, that's high level what that would be, and those are pretty much the trends for escalation. But 19.2 for potential town hall, and then same cost, obviously, not talking about renovation for senior center, so obviously it's a much lower construction cost for the senior center, but total for that would be 5.5. So if you put everything together, just under 25 for soft costs, construction, renovation, design. That's what your program as presented is estimated to be projected. Now, for something like this, you look at, and I tried to put in here some debt analysis, but there's something going on with our debt charts that I gotta talk with the treasurer collector a little bit more on. But I think as we go through and we get better numbers, what would this look like? I think one of the reasons why the board, I think wanted to advance and look at something like this is we know that we have a lot of debt, both in town, not in town, general fund and excluded debt service. So for example, by 2042, we will have 0 debt service. So we need to figure out how to program in some, whether we're excluded or not excluded debt. And you get that through building projects. And this definitely fills in most, if not all of that, well, definitely all of that debt service. But it also accounts for debt service that has fallen off over the years that we haven't taken advantage of. So I think we were running probably about $1 million, $1.2 million between excluded and non-excluded. I think this overall debt service per year would be, I think, $1.6 million. When I was running it, so it's slightly higher in terms of annual debt service, but you could totally exclude this and it wouldn't impact the general fund.
From my numbers, that sounds about right, in terms of where our debt service is consistently. What effect would this have on our levy?
Yeah, so if this is excluded, it would be outside of the levy, right? And then this is nowhere near the 5% of indebtedness against our total valuation.
Okay,
I had that number, I can get that for you, Harry, but we're nowhere close to it. I wanna say we're less than 1% of our 5% cap.
okay.
So we are well below what is recommended for carrying debt service. So we're right for a building project, whether it's a town project, a school project, we need to fill in something. But obviously, getting it sooner rather than later, because if we wait several years to be able to start something like this, people's tax bills have already fallen off, so they would see this major jump. But the idea is for building projects to try to keep it flat as much as possible, or
Right,
somewhat
right.
stable, if you will. So I can send separately what that looks like in terms of affecting the tax rate and our debt service. But just because I didn't want to give you a false debt service chart, I didn't include that in tonight's presentation.
And just to be clear, again, just to reiterate, the intent, I think, would be that this would be an excluded debt project, and so it would not impact the levy at all. And similar to the fire truck, if it were to pass, once the bill's paid off, it falls off or is plugged in with an additional
Right.
building project or fund. And I think,
Well, definitely don't wanna put this in included debt,
right,
definitely.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
just
and
for the public,
I don't think we
because
could put it in, right?
Right.
Yeah, we don't have the capacity to, but, and you think most, if not all of our building projects, the library falls off in 2030 something, 2032, 33. Our town hall has been around not quite 100 years, but Most of these are 30-year bonds.
Yeah,
At right now, the bond market, I think, is about 4%. I haven't seen most recent after they lowered the interest rates, but municipal bonds are, I think I estimated debt service at about 4%. I think we could get better than that, especially with our bond rating.
for this amount of money anyways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and for the term that we're looking to borrow for
Right.
sure. But of course, you know, it depends on when you do it, and this is obviously trying to be really conservative on costs. There's design modifications that happen, you know, whether you cut down the square footage of things, but this is as programmed what it would look like.
You know, one of my, and Leah brought it up earlier, was doing this thing right. You know, making sure that we don't have to come back and say, oh, like the fire station, oh, we can't use the upstairs because we never finished it out right. And you're saying that this is done right. What we're looking at, the conceptual design, that's good for years down the road. We're planning down the road, not just today.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get another shot of a new town hall or senior center in a long time. So that's the goal, is to build a good building that tries to meet what the community has identified and staff have identified for needs. Of course, there's gonna be public feedback. I think some of the next steps that I mentioned are, you know, if we're still moving forward and feel comfortable at special town meeting asking to advance the master plan. Again, that's not asking for any tax dollars, just asking for use of the Heights money. And then, as we go through that master plan process, trying to establish a formal building committee for either the municipal services facility or separate building committees for each building. And engaging those stakeholders and then going to the public and seeing what they want to make sure that it fits truly what they have identified for needs.
Was
And
it,
then, sure, sorry, Tom.
like town hall?
Yep.
Was it, I know a year or so ago, we discussed possibly a joint building? I mean, what would the cost difference be to building a new structure as opposed to putting all that money into that old building?
Sure, so let me just stop sharing real quick.
A multi-level, you know, town building that could serve the purpose of a senior center, a town hall, town offices, a historical, whatever the heck we need it for.
So the building cost for per square foot for the senior center, which is totally new construction, is $624 per square foot, whereas for renovating, it's $682. So obviously, when you get into the, you know, thousands of square feet, even that, you know, $60 per square foot is pretty substantial. So hypothetically, if it was a brand new building, obviously, when you merge, you share on mechanical, you share on restrooms, you share on elevator if necessary. So obviously, we'd realize some costs, so I could go into the back end and hypothetically, if we were to merge all that based off of those same assumptions, I could get you what that potentially would look like. And you do save money on design, right? So you're not separately going out to bid for,
Yeah, and I'm thinking about winning
Designing.
over the public too, you know, I mean, if we're gonna do this, and I know I keep bringing it up, it's like the historical building, you know, it drives me crazy that people get so emotional over these old structures. I'd rather see the town, if we're gonna do it right.
Yep.
And build a building that's gonna serve multiple departments and seniors and, you know.
yeah, no, I think that's the goal. But again, I think that's steered by you guys and the community, right? If we get a lot of feedback that for some reason they still really love town hall as it exists now, and they wanna keep it, then, you know, that's a call to the community to move forward and as this has planned, but if it's,
You could get numbers for that as well,
Yeah,
a multi-purpose building?
Yeah.
And that way maybe we present the two and then let the town decide.
yeah, sure, I mean, I think that's probably better for the master plan process as well, right? Cause that's where you're gonna really get enhanced feedback on everything that we've just mentioned, right?
Right.
People are gonna look and say, no, why did we do that? It makes sense just to share.
Right.
And then they'll go back and confirm that, and the results of that master plan will be probably what you've mentioned, if that's what the will.
Well, then I'm thinking just something as crazy as the heights, right?
Yep.
That property, one side could be the building, the other side that's not, really can't use for much, there's the parking. I mean, something, I know that's out there, but I'm just throwing that, out, you know.
Yeah, we need to throw everything out there and see what makes the most
Right,
sense.
I mean,
and-
utilize that property to see, especially with the over 55 community, have some,
Exactly.
you know,
And that's, I think,
Obviously,
I was gonna say, I think some of it is important because if we're, you know, and this has been kind of my stance along the way is with the transparency in numbers. And so if we say, okay, maintaining town hall is important to you, this is what it's gonna cost.
Right.
So is it important enough for you to pay more for it, potentially, probably, because based on the cost difference between renovation versus new construction? Or are you more concerned about the dollar amount, and this is a more economical way to do that? And so I think, to your point, Tom, it's a little bit of what's your priority? I think we have heard from the community individually and anecdotally that town hall is not optimally utilized, that there's not sufficient recreation space, the space for seniors is not optimal. And so we're taking that feedback and trying to address it and give the options. But again, knowing that the renovation piece is okay, fine, but it's gonna come at a higher price tag. And if that's what's important to the community, then that's what's important to the community.
I would also add though, as part of that, I think it's important to consider if there's a new facility that's done, you still have an aging building that's town responsible, so what happens with that? I mean, you still need funding to maintain that.
Or
Do whatever.
decommission it, or you know, like.
Right,
Yeah.
and
So
what
there is
happens
some-
with that?
You know, so I think as we save some money on building a new building, we do have a line item that's included in that site development for demolition. So if you built a completely new facility and you have a vacant annex and community hall, it probably may be best just to demolish the town hall. If we've identified that it's not a good use for town use, and we're not gonna spend the money on it, I don't know why we would have an empty
Empty building,
building
right.
in
To
town,
sit,
you know,
deteriorate.
sitting there.
But I think that's important to be transparent about and
Yep.
say, this is, you want a new building, this could be a very real scenario that you're gonna have to decide. And if you're not willing to demolish this building, you're still gonna have to pay for the upkeep on it, and is that what you're willing to do?
Yeah.
So I think making sure that all those pieces are included when we present it.
And you said that the dispatch piece was totally separate, that's another item all unto itself.
Yeah, so that was included as a part of this project, but I wanted to present that separately because I think
Okay.
that deserves its own discussion.
That's more on the state side funding too at this point?
Yeah, I mean, so the goal is, so we've shared with the state that we have conducted this. We have initial costs, and I'd be happy to share that with you. Right now,
No, it's fine,
no, okay.
that's fine. I appreciate it, but it's fine.
But the, can't remember the program at the top of my head, but the development program through State 911 Department pays for design, pays for construction. So that's not something that we have to go to the town for. So we are gonna ask for design money from 911 Department on their upcoming cycle, which is next spring.
Cool.
Thank you, Austin, for the presentation.
Yep.
Is it possible that the presentation is made available either at least to us, but probably on the website also? No, you blast it that it's a draft or conceptual, you know what I mean? I don't want it to go out that this is set in stone, but that this is a conceptual plan or whatever. And that way I think we can, for me, I jotted down a bunch of numbers and tried to look, you know, between space allocations and everything, but it would be nice to spend a little.
Absolutely. Yeah, so if the board's okay, I'd like to create a project page on the website that talks about this, and we can put this as a resource and some other just informational items on
And
there.
as we get the other information that all of us have asked for, I think, to include it also as a goal. So I wanna commend the board, Austin, thank you, and Tamika for advancing this, but also the commitment that this board has made to continue working on moving this forward. I know we talked about it a little bit on Thursday, but I think it's really important that we are showing a commitment to continue the actual true conversation with the hope of having something realized and not just have plans that we sit on a shelf and never look at again. Because
And it's just like everything that's, it's gonna cost money and we need to be able to explain why this is important and why the town needs it so that people can get on board with it.
And I guess for me, the cost isn't the ultimate thing, isn't the cost. 25, 30 million is not the issue. It's the effect it has on your taxes. That's what the average citizen cares about.
Right, well,
If it's gonna cost me $60 a year, okay, if it costs me 3,000 a year, that's different. So, and I think, and that's gonna depend on the financing, whether we do a 30-year, 40-year, whatever we do, what interest rates, they'll have an effect on it. I think most people in town know we need to do something with what we've got, we have to.
the only other comment that I would like to make, and for me personally, some level of accountability for the construction when we get to that point. Because this building and public safety building are two that are in my head as far as there were significant concerns right from the get-go. And so since I say it again and again, since I've been in town, I feel like every special we're allocating free cash for something at one of those two buildings, and there are two kind of newest buildings in town. And we look at Glenwood School also that has significant issues. So some level of accountability throughout the construction process, but then also post-construction, because
I don't think we've ever adopted a fund for the construction costs after that. A resolving fund or something, yeah.
And I
I
know-
don't think we ever did.
And I know one of our other considerations, right, as a town engineer, and if we can fit that into the staffing plan and everything, might also not to oversee the entirety of the project, but just another layer of oversight from the town perspective, as well. So that, I just wanna say is equally important for me.
so, and my last question is just at what point, how do we solicit feedback from residents on how they're feeling about all this?
So I think Austin, with if the special warrant article passes at the special town meeting, then that would trigger into the next phase, right? And then which would include some we can put together some public information or public
Yeah.
input.
Yeah, so that's probably the perfect time to start really engaging stakeholders through a municipal building committee, because just establishing a municipal building committee doesn't mean that you're gonna build something, right? But it's kind of the committee that leads the project and engages people at public meetings, so
And that's something we've been trying to do for years.
Yeah.
Municipal building committee.
But especially for projects, it's best to have a committee that is dedicated just to that project, so whether it's a senior center building committee, fire station building committee, town hall.
I can't sign those.
And more so what the board I think has been trying to do, which is establish just an overarching what is the condition of our buildings kind of
Right.
committee.
Yeah.
Thank you, Austin. And thank all of staff also for participating in that and working with everyone as well. Are there any other future agenda requests for our next meeting or upcoming meetings to kind of as we look into the holiday season and everything?
I don't know if this would be an agenda item, but I'd like to get an update on Glenwood and the status where we stand, cause I know I thought we heard that Wachusett was doing a court test on that. And I haven't heard anything recently from it,
Yeah,
so.
I can give you an update now. I don't believe they have the results of the test yet.
Okay.
I do have one, have we heard anything on the nuisance dog hearing? Are we due for any dates or I can't remember if we decided they were coming here or if updates were
No,
supposed to
I think
go
it
to the,
was- I think it was going through Jen,
Through
and I
Jen.
think we got confirmation that the insurance policy was good. They had already confirmed when they were here that they had enrolled and were starting classes with Stephanie, I think.
I think there was just, part of the conditions was that she keeps the ACO updated
Yeah.
on, I just wanna make sure that that's happening as well.
So maybe that can even just be a memo to the board, Tamika, it doesn't necessarily have to be a agenda request
Oh, yeah,
unless
yeah,
there's,
that's
yeah,
just-
no, that's totally fine. Thanks for keeping it on your radar because any other agenda requests? Our upcoming meetings are, and if you think of anything, by all means, just email them to Tamika, Austin and I, and we'll try to fit them in based on, you know, the upcoming meetings or where they should fit in the agenda or whatever. Our upcoming meetings are Tuesday, November 12th, because that's the following Veterans Day. We have one on, the special town meeting is Thursday, the 21st, and we will probably post for 5:30 for that night as a select board meeting, so that if we wanna address those two zoning bylaws changes. And then Monday, the 25th, that's the week of Thanksgiving that we are considering moving off. If we were to move off, then we would have a December 2nd meeting, which would be the tax classification hearing. Currently, our regular scheduled December meetings are December 9th and December 23rd. The 23rd one is obviously 2 days before Christmas. So I think in some ways, if the board, think about it, if the board's amenable to doing the second, we might have to designate someone to sign the warrants for essentially the month of December, but we could maybe do the second and whatever 2 weeks is from there. And then, so it would be the off 2 weeks in December rather than the on 2 weeks, if we wanted to, potentially, and just designate someone to sign.
You can think about that, sure.
I think, in my head, that makes sense, but maybe it doesn't
You're
make sense.
thinking the 2nd and the 16th.
Yes.
But you would
Yeah.
designate somebody to sign the warrants on
Yes.
the regular weeks.
Yes, yeah, yep, yeah. So that way we don't have a meeting on the week of Christmas.
So how about I add that to the November 12th agenda so that you guys can think about it and then make your decision, and then we'll know how to move forward. After that
The
meeting.
sooner we decide, the better.
Yes.
And maybe we can, I can sit with you and we can just look at the
Update the
dates and make
website.
sure that everything makes sense and what would have to happen as far as warrant designation and everything for those. And we can send a memo out to the board just so everybody can look at their calendar and talk to their families and everything before making a decision. Okay? Is there any other business to come before the board tonight? Thank you, I appreciate everyone's work and the late night. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Roll call, Harry.
Second, aye.
That's an I.
Ledger I.
Galvin, aye?
Whitman, I, 9:26.